Hi everyone, welcome. It's a good day to be discussing some intellectual thing about international affairs today. We don't come here all the time. We almost our 2-year anniversary. This place, the Geopolitical Forum, and from 10 days from now, there's 2 years anniversary, or 3 years, 2 years, and we have gone a long way. Now we always have speaker. Today we have speaker. This is our speaker, Ernest Norrman. And we have, after an intro, the speaker will speak. After he's finished, probably within an hour, we will have 30 minutes of Q&A. So during Q&A, please keep your voice as questions and related to this topic for 30 minutes. And then after 30 minutes, free for all. You can
start
have
yelling
conversations, debate, discussion. You can continue with your questions. It doesn't even have to be relevant to the topic. That's free for all, literally. You can even, I wouldn't prefer, but you're free to have multiple conversations at the same time. It's a free for all, literally. It alternates your own discretion. So that's the plan. That's the agenda. We have gone to different places, different institutions, different think tanks, to capitalize on their setup, their resources, and of course their speaker. But those other places, because the governance, because the funding, they always, as are well aware of, they are almost always mainstream, and that's where we come in, the Geopolitical Forum. We don't have a budget. We don't have
budget, no money, nothing.
We don't have money. We don't have governance. So we are free.
They're abusing us.
To stay
away from,
to stay outside of mainstream. That's where we come in. That's why I think we don't want to be one of them. We are different. That's where our value is. I hope you find it valuable to you. So we have this thing going on in the Middle East. I think it's a great opportunity today for us to explore that outside of the mainstream. If we certain aspects happen to be in line with the mainstream, so be it. But we're not obligated. We don't feel obligated to be in line with mainstream. That's the value. That's the value proposition that the Geopolitical Forum offers. So since October 7th, 2023, the attack on the Israeli concert-goers by Hamas, it's been a year and a half. A lot has gone on during that time. Most importantly, the humanitarian, the death and destruction had gone on Gaza Strip multiple times over, literally, because they went from north to the south to the north to the south, and had a ceasefire, and the ceasefire is ceased. Right now they're fighting again, and there's a sign of expanding. It's expanding to Lebanon, Houthi, and now they're threatening Iran because they feel they're threatened. So rather than threaten them, they're kind of probably a negotiation somehow. So there's a lot going on. So we take this opportunity to really explore this topic. It's an important topic for that region, for America, and probably for mankind. Now, Ernest Norrman, he is a long-term observer of the Middle Eastern affairs, that region. He also is a close tracker of the Hamas crisis since day one. And he already presented his analysis in November in the College of Complexes, where there's a iron fist moderator. So now it's been since then, so we can have a lot of update. maybe he has some new views on those that could share with us as for our benefit. Ernie is CPA. He's got a MBA from University of Chicago. Yeah, he's retired. He also used to be a small business owner for multiple times, and he also was within the U.S. Army Vietnam veteran. So he's also currently retired. He's actively involved in professional and civic organizations. So he's an intellectual thinker. He's also a doer. So that's great. It's my honor to have Ernie with us today to share his analysis of this important thing going on in this world. And so with no further ado, please join me in welcoming Ernie.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. You covered a couple of things, a couple of the preliminaries that I want to mention, how this whole thing got going. Eric saw my presentation. You were at the presentation in November, right? You were there, weren't you?
No.
Oh, you weren't there? Oh, I thought you were there. Anyway, we met at the College of Complexes, and originally a lady by the name of Janice Glinzer was going to give a talk called the Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, based on this book by Ilan Pappé, who's an intellectual, a Jewish intellectual, I believe originally from Israel, but now lives in England. And he wrote that book, and she was going to just talk about that, and I asked to be added to the program just to say a few things because it's a topic of great interest to me. Then before the date of the talk, she backed out, so I took over the whole thing and have gone beyond just the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. I'm hoping that maybe she'll give her talk at some point in the future on that at the college or somewhere else. And there's a couple of preliminary things that I like to talk about. First of all, I admit that I have a bias in this case, but I will try and give an even-handed presentation if I can, and we'll like to hear what everybody's opinion is. And my bias, I try and show in my clothing what my bias is, if you haven't figured that out already. And jokingly, I said earlier, we have to be a little bit careful here because we don't want to end up in Louisiana or El Salvador. But I think in this group, we
Guantanamo.
Huh?
Guantanamo.
Or Guantanamo, any of those, you know. And a year from now, where there a whole bunch of us may be down there. You never know.
Cuba.
But okay, the topics that I'm going to cover. Oh, I have a little pet peeve on this, and I'll set this out right up front. I have been very critical of Israel for a long time, long before October 7th. I have not much agreed with the way the Israelis have been handling their relationship, especially with the Palestinians, but other things as well. And certainly since Netanyahu has been in power. Before that, not so much. But I'm quite anti-Israel. But people have often said that people who are anti-Israel are anti-Semitic. That is absolutely, positively not true. They are not the same thing. Okay. There are people.
I know some people you need to tell that to.
Oh, I tell it to everybody I get a chance, okay? And the people say to
That's
me,
why the media is trying to make it equal, so
Yeah.
that way that you don't go against the Israel.
yeah, well, there's a great tendency in our country to favor Israel from the point of view of the media and elites. And in fact, that goes not just in the United States. I've talked to people from other countries and asked them their view on the Gaza and Israel situation. And the typical answer, I talked to a gentleman from France not too long ago. He said, well, in France, the people seem to be very supportive of the Palestinians, but the government and the elites are supporting Israel. And that pretty much across the board. It's in this country, The polls show that more people support the Palestinians than Israel, but the government is very supportive of Israel. So anyway, I'm going to try and go through this a little bit quickly, since we have a small group when we get into the discussion part. As I said, this conflict started long before October 7th, and a lot of people picked the date of the Nakba in 1948, I believe, but it even goes further back than that. That's the big one. So I want to talk a little bit about the founding of Israel. A lot of us know a lot about that, but we may not. I've learned a lot of details in looking, first of all, in reading this book and doing a lot of research in other places, including on the internet. I've learned a lot about the founding of Israel. I'll talk a little bit about that and how the way that happened is what is really the basis for the problems that we're having now and have been having ever since 1948, because it was not done in a way that was considered fair to all involved. One thing a lot of people don't talk about are the parallels between the founding of Israel and the founding of the United States. There are a lot of parallels there. A lot of people deny these, but I'm going to lay them out there. I'm not saying the situations are identical, but there are some important similarities, and they may actually affect our thinking a little bit. Of course, the right of people and nations to defend themselves, that's kind of a given, but what are the limits on those rights, particularly in the case of Israel and Gaza? We'll talk about that a little bit, and the role that the United States should play. That's what bothers me the most. Not even so much the terrible things that are going on over there. Oh, that certainly bothers me that 50,000 people have been killed and 90+% of the infrastructure has been destroyed. That's a problem. But what bothers me is the role that the United States is playing, which makes all of us who are citizens or taxpayers or even residents, we've got to, whether we like it or not, we're part of that. We're part of that whole situation. And how will this end? Of course, everybody's asking that question. What's going to happen? How's it going to come out? And we have a lot of different predictions on that, and that's maybe what we'll discuss in the discussion period a little bit too, where we think things are going to go, and also ancillary problems that are caused, public policy, and in some cases private policy that goes on, and an increase in anti-Semitism. Okay, in terms of the founding of Israel and Gaza, I've tried to put a few of the important milestones on that second handout. Did you get both of them, or did you just get one?
I just have one.
Oh, reach the, is that, let's see, yeah, that's somehow I didn't go all the way around the room on the second one. Okay, before World War I, Palestine was part of the Ottoman Empire, which covered more or less from a little outside of Vienna all the way down through Turkey and the Middle East. Very much of that area was part of the Ottoman Turkic Empire. Okay, and so that's who controlled it at the time. Then after World War I, that all changed. The British kind of carved up the Middle East to their liking. They received the mandates over Palestine from what was then the League of Nations. They gave mandates to various, there were many mandates that were given out, but the British received a lot of them in the Middle East area, specifically Palestine. Now actually going back before World War I, we should talk a little bit about the Zionist movement, which has a lot to do with this whole situation. That was founded around the 1880s, 1890s by primarily Theodor Herzl and some others. Created the Zionist movement, which I admit I'm not an expert on, but it was created as a secular movement, not as a religious movement. It was a secular movement to help Jews who had been suffering from pogroms. The pogroms have been going. Everybody know what a pogrom is? It's an attack. Yeah, those go back. I looked and found them as far back as the 1100s. Okay, so and maybe they go back even further than that. And there were large numbers of them before World War II as well. And to kind of help the Jewish people out who were getting beat up everywhere, the Zionist movement was formed for the purpose of finding a homeland for the Jews. Okay, that was the purpose of the Zionist movement. Now, originally, now we think of the Zionist movement as being directly related to Israel, to the land of Israel, what we now know as Israel. But that isn't true. That was not necessarily part of the initial goals of the Zionist movement. It was just to have a homeland for Jewish people. They, in fact, the first location they were considering was Uganda. Okay, and I learned this, by the way. I don't know how much you guys know about the college complexes, but they have the speaker speaks, then there's Q&A, and then there's rebuttals. Okay, a little bit like we're doing it here. And I learned a bunch of things when I gave that talk. I learned a lot of things that I did not know from the questions and comments of the people that were there. And one of the things I learned is that the current day Israel was not part of their original plan. They first went to Uganda in Africa, of all places, but they did not get a particularly warm reception there. They said, look, we already live here. We want to give up our territory. Then they tried Argentina, and that they didn't get a friendly welcome in Argentina either. Okay, people don't want to give up their territory. Is what it's about. And there have been a variety of suggestions. There were some suggestions after World War II that a part of Germany be taken, since they're the ones that committed the Holocaust, or most of it. And so a chunk of Germany should be set aside for a Jewish state. And then there have been other suggestions since then.
So, I guess what I feel like I'm hearing is that with a lot of the ideas there, a homeland meant not necessarily we're going to go somewhere and we're going to be accepted and blend in with the local population. Like it seems like it meant in many of these places that the local area was going to give up part of their land for the
Yes, that's exactly.
It wasn't about assimilation.
It was not about assimilation. The Jews, frankly, for centuries have been fairly good at least partially assimilating, but not so good that there weren't pogroms. Okay.
Yeah.
And so the notion of having a homeland, I mean, even today, I suppose almost the majority of the Jews in the world live in Israel, but there are Jews all over the world and generally blend in. And in fact, in the Middle East, things were reasonably peaceful, more peaceful perhaps than in Europe, between Jews and the other people who lived there, in that case the Arabs. But no, they wanted a homeland because they thought this would give them the most protection. It's a place where Jews could go if they wanted to really be safe. Okay, and sometimes these things don't work out exactly that way. But that was the theory. And later on, the Zionist movement was somewhat co-opted by religious forces. It was now partially at least a religiously controlled movement. Okay, the League of Nations, formed in 1922, and I believe it lasted up until 1948. They gave mandates to different nations, particularly Britain, to control some of the areas after World War I, and that they were called upon to help find a Jewish homeland. Now, first I should say the mandate encompassed what is called the 1917 Balfour Declaration, okay, which was Lord Balfour made a declaration that the Jews should have a homeland. And he did not again specify any territory, but he said they should have a homeland. And that was encompassed into the mandate that the Jews should have a homeland. And there were others that did this as well, but there was a lot of racism involved. We'll get into that in a little while. Lloyd George was in favor of giving the Jews a homeland, but there was a lot of racism there. Just the language that they used and how they discussed it. And Churchill, of all people, Churchill also said that the Jews should have a homeland, but he didn't want it to be in Europe. He was one of the ones that put the kibosh on the idea of Europe. He said we should put them somewhere else.
Yeah,
We should buy the Arabs.
On the moon.
And on the moon if possible, but not. Churchill is quoted as having said about the Arabs, just to give you an idea of the level of the racism, he said that he said several nasty things, but probably the best known quote is that the Arabs don't eat much, but when they eat, it's usually camel dung. So that was Winston Churchill. Okay, one of the world's great statesmen said that. All right. So at first, the British attempted to negotiate an agreement between the Zionists and the Palestine and the Palestinians. At this point, they had kind of set the area should be in the Middle East, and they were not successful in doing that. They passed it on to the League of Nations. They also were unsuccessful, and it ended up in the hands of the UN. And the UN did finally come up with a partition plan. It was called UN Resolution 181. If anybody's really interested, they can look at that. I have not, but the purpose of that basically set up a two-state solution, giving the Palestinians certain land and giving Israel certain land. And there are some maps. If any of you are map freaks, I wish I'd had time to print some out. But how it was set up, that original from Resolution 181 actually gave the Palestinians a lot more land than current plans or suggestions, including Oslo, as far as what land they're supposed to get. Resolution 181 was voted on November 29th of, I have this wrong here, it says 2024, it was 1947, I believe. There were 33 countries that voted for that resolution, 13 against, 10 abstentions. Generally speaking, the Middle Eastern states, the Arab states and the Middle Eastern states voted against it. They didn't, they favored the Palestinians, who did not want to give up any land either. And the large country that voted against it was India, but they had like 200 million or more Muslims in their population at that particular time. Most of Western Europe and most of the Western Hemisphere were in the 33 that voted for it. Okay, and almost immediately the ethnic cleansing started. They started pushing Arabs out of the territory that was going to be Israel, and hence the term ethnic cleansing. Sometimes compensating people for their property, sometimes not. But that's where were some 700,000 people over the period of the next couple of years were pushed out of their homes into the areas that were going to be reserved for Palestine. The next important date, May 4th of 1948, David Ben-Gurion declared Israel's independence, and it was largely recognized very quickly. I think Russia was one of the first countries to recognize it, and that went on for quite a while. There's still many countries in the Arab world that have not recognized them, including Saudi Arabia, for example. They have not. There are lists of which countries. In fact, I may have some lists of people who are interested specifically in that. That, of course, created a period of violence. I mean, people. I don't know exactly what they were thinking that they were going to get away with this. I think they decided that it was easier to push the Arabs around than the people in Uganda or Argentina or Europe. And that's one of the reasons they ended up in that area. Now, there were a lot of religious Jews who liked the idea of the current location of Israel because, you know, this is the traditional home for thousands of years of the Jewish people. But it of course created ongoing violence. The 1967 war, the 73 war, the first Intifada, which was 1987 to 1993. Not as much violence in those days, but a lot of protests and so forth, a little bit of violence. The second Intifada, on the other hand, was quite violent. 4,000 were people were killed in the second Intifada, which was 2000 to 2005. Camp David, there were some attempts at peace. Camp David in 1978, and then the Oslo Accords in 1993. The Oslo Accords basically created a two-state solution with slightly different borders than the ones that had been set up earlier. And Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin met at the White House with Bill Clinton. Now, before that, the Camp David was Carter, Sadat, and Begin, and these agreements didn't hold. One of the bad effects is, as a result of the 1979 agreement, Anwar Sadat was assassinated. He was assassinated in October of 1981, and it is generally considered the reason for that is because the people they didn't want to make peace with Israel. And then in 1995, Yitzhak Rabin, who'd attempted to make peace with the Oslo Accords, he was assassinated, okay, in November of 1995. So there were a lot of people that had very strong feelings on this, obviously, on both sides. We'll talk some more about Benjamin Netanyahu. He was into power, out of power, back into power, and he's very obviously he's far right Likud person, and is kind of the personification of the problems, in my opinion. He's doesn't have, well, he's made it quite clear he doesn't want a two-state solution. He wants the whole area to be Israel. Okay, and flip side, Hamas. They don't necessarily want peace either. They want the whole area to be Arab. And how soon is this going to change? It's hard to say, but we can look at other cases. Again, I'm going to drop back now to the parallels between the founding of Israel and the founding of the United States. There are an awful lot of similarities, and that in both cases, what we have is we have Europeans going to another part of the world and seeing land that they wanted for one reason or another. It may have been for agriculture or just space to build more, to have more people, etc. They came and they took the land. In some cases they compensated people, in some cases they didn't. Okay. In the early days of the United States, before the United States was actually formed as a nation, and for many years after, there were some peaceful periods between America and the Native Americans, and there were some conflicts. Okay, the conflicts grew later on as the Native Americans began to realize that this wasn't necessarily going to end in their favor the way they wanted it to end, and so we have, you know, the biggest conflict, or the most shall we say, the turning point was Little Bighorn, when I believe it was, I don't remember what the Indian chief's name was. They killed,
Sitting Bull?
what's that?
Wasn't it Sitting Bull?
Might have been Sitting Bull and Custer. It was Custer,
Right,
right?
yeah.
It was Custer. And I draw a comparison between Little Bighorn and October the 7th. I think there were a lot of cases there because they were cases where the party that was being oppressed by the people coming in and ultimately are seeing that they're possibly losing this thing and coming in and making a big splash. But Little Bighorn was kind of considered the end for the Native Americans, because at that point, a lot of people who lived in the East who didn't really care about what was going on in the Wild West. They didn't care. They weren't, everything was fine out East. So they, at that point, everybody became interested. And a big push to control the Native Americans began. And during that time period, we should realize from the beginning, 7 to 13 million Native Americans were killed. So it was a very bloody process, a big land grab, and in that sense, I compare it to what's going on in Israel, which is colonialization. That was colonialization of the United States at that time. During the, 15th century on into the 20th century, most of the great nations of Europe went about the world and planted their flag and colonized and took the resources back that they wanted, but they left some things. They left some manufacturing and transportation facilities and some technology in the process. So it wasn't all bad for the colonized people, but it was basically one people taking over another, and in that sense, they're very definitely parallels. However, all of those 15th through 19th century colonizations, even into the early 20th century, for the most part, they ended in 1940, 47, 48, for example. India gained their independence. All of these countries gained their independence. I think the last ones were in Africa in the 60s. So there was very little colonization, with two major exceptions, of course. The first was the Western Hemisphere. Okay, the colonists had basically taken over all the countries of the Western Hemisphere, and the native peoples there either assimilated in many cases through marriage and other ways, or they were destroyed. Okay. Now, I mentioned the 7 to 13 million Native Americans that died in the United States. That was actually fairly kind. I mean, we had Andrew Jackson and his Indian Relocation Act of 1830. I think a lot of us have heard of that. In 1830, there was an act which essentially said all the Native Americans have to go west of the Mississippi, and a lot did. There's the famous case of the Cherokees, who were in North Carolina, and they were forced to move to Oklahoma. That was called the Trail of Tears. Lots and lots of people died, and it was a bad move for them because it was a totally different environment for them. And in fact, in that case, it relates to today a little bit too, because the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, I don't remember his name, but he said, no, you can't do that. Well, Andrew Jackson said, that's fine, then try and stop me. Okay, and the Cherokees are now in Oklahoma. They're not in North Carolina. That may have some relevance to what's going on now. The Supreme Court is saying things, but they don't have a Department of Defense at their disposal, okay? And the president does. So we'll see what happens there. That's kind of relevant to what's going on now. So those are the main. There are a lot of parallels. A lot of people say, no, there's no parallel. Well, there's some differences. The Native Americans were hunter-gatherers, and they were conquered by a relatively technological society, relatively speaking. And today, technologically, the Gazans don't have the firepower that Israel has, but they have a lot of the same basic technology. People say, so those things aren't comparable. I think they're very comparable. And there was a little bit of a patina of shall we say, officialness about it because of the UN vote. There was no UN or UN vote back in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s when the Europeans were taking over this land here. That, I think, in about 1880 is when the last of the Native American tribes finally surrendered. And okay, has everybody here heard of manifest destiny? What that is, you know what manifest destiny is. This was the theory, shall we say, that the United States used to justify pushing the Native Americans out. And it basically says, since our technology is superior and we're going to make better use of this land than these folks are, it's right for us to take the land. That's manifest destiny. That's what. And I think there's a little bit of that that's going on. In theory, they don't call it that, but I think there's a little bit of that going on in Israel and Palestine now. That theory, to an extent, is backing up what some people think is the right to do. Now, moving on to October the 7th. Well, why did October the 7th happen? A lot of people, the people who are extremely pro-Zionist, pro-Israel, say, well, this whole thing started on October the 7th. And it was those nasty Hamas people who came in and killed 1,200 people and took a bunch of lives. That's when it started. That's not when it started, okay? It started long before that. And the October 7th thing was just a much more extreme version of the first and second intifadas. And how long is this going to go on? I don't know. We can talk about that. I have some thoughts on that as well. But people say, well, okay, Israel has the right to defend themselves. And certainly, I think we would all agree that if a group of people or a nation is attacked, they do have a right to defend themselves. But are there any limits on that right? Do they have the right to basically wipe out an entire people and a culture because they think they might be dangerous? I don't think so. What makes sense? What is fair? What is right? I don't know, but we've had 50,000 Palestinians killed, 92% of the infrastructure destroyed. And it seems to me that the people who are in charge in Israel really want to simply get rid of the Palestinians. And they love Trump's plan, whether it probably won't ever happen, but his plan of turning Gaza into a big resort, moving the Palestinians to Egypt, Jordan, and everywhere else, and turning that into a resort. That's fine, because then, Israel takes over the whole area that they want. So that's why they favor that. What are the limits? I don't know, but I mean, we've got better than somewhere around a 40 to 1 ratio of killed Gazans versus Israelis, and I'm not sure. Those are like almost World War II Nazi numbers, where if somebody killed Nazi soldiers in Norway, they would sometimes go in and kill most of the people in the village, and that was their method of controlling things. And we're almost at that level there, and I find this to be very, very problematic. As far as Netanyahu, he's in charge now. He'll be in charge for a while, even though polls have showed that up to 77% of Israelis do not want Netanyahu. They want him out, okay? And these polls vary from 59 to 70%, 77%. They don't like him or they don't like his policies, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously, and this is kind of amazing, since the people in Israel are directly in the line of attack and have been attacked, but they still don't like the way Netanyahu's handling it. Why is he doing that? I think he believes it to begin with. I think he wants, well, he's made it clear he doesn't want a two-state solution. He wants a one-state solution, Israel. Okay, and that's the geopolitical view that he has. But he also has some personal issues similar to Trump. One of Trump's main advantages to being elected president is it kept him out of jail, probably permanently. Kept him out of jail for all of the reasons that he had, what, 41 indictments against him or something like that. Netanyahu, if the war ends and he is, at some point, is no longer the president of Israel or the prime minister, he'll face legal challenges. He's, I don't know all the details of that, but he stands a fair chance of being convicted, and whether he'll ever go to jail or not, I don't know, but he certainly doesn't want to. But as long as the war goes on, he doesn't have to worry about that. So I sincerely believe that's one of his reasons. It draws an analogy to the old movie. Anybody remember the movie Wag the Dog? You guys were all, you remember? Okay, most of the young folks here won't remember it, but it's a movie that came out when Clinton was president. And it's a story about a president of the United States who had some problems, personal conduct or whatever, or he was in the line of fire. And how did he get himself off the front pages? He started a war. Okay, that's the whole theme of the movie. And coincidentally, at that same time period, Bill Clinton, who had what's her name, Monica Lewinsky in all the headlines, bombed Sudan. I don't know if any of you remember that. Maybe not. He bombed Sudan.
It was a fake.
Huh?
They kind of staged the whole thing. If I remember correctly, they didn't actually go to war. They staged a war.
They staged in the Wag the Dog.
In Wag the Dog.
Yeah. But the whole purpose of it was if a country is at war, typically everybody will get behind the president. In the Gulf War, I think it was the first or second Gulf War? I think it was the second one. Before we attacked, a third of the people were in favor of attacking. At that time, it would have been Saddam, I guess. Well, that was the first Gulf War. A third of the people said yes if the UN goes along with it, and a third said no, we shouldn't go to war at all. Okay, the UN didn't okay it. The US went to war, and the day after, 2/3 of the people were in favor and behind the war. So it's just a technique that works for politicians. If you can start a war, you can get other things off the headlines, and it worked then. And I think that's got to be in part of Netanyahu's calculations. Now, what bothers me most about this, of course, I'm bothered by the fact there are 50,000 people killed and 1,200 people killed in the October 7th attack, and Gaza's been turned into a moonscape. That bothers me. But in a sense, my primary concern is the role the United States is playing. 80% of the bombs and artillery shells that are used by Israel, 80% or more, come from the United States. Okay, those bombs are dropping down with an American flag on them. I mean, they don't literally have an American flag on them, but figuratively they do. They're American weapons. It's American support. It's supporting that whole thing. And the majority of Americans do not agree with that, and I don't agree with it. And you know, my position is we definitely should not be supporting Israel, and we should be working toward. I don't know. We'll talk when we talk about how this ends. I have some thoughts, and I'll express what I've heard from other people. I mean, at this point, what I would say to Palestinians, if I had a chance to speak to a group of Palestinians, I would say, American Jews are not your enemy, okay? And even most of the Jews in Israel are not your enemy. The people who are your enemy is the Likud government in Israel and the American government which support you. Not the American people, the American government. And so, I don't know. So up until this time, Palestinians in this country have been, I think they've been quiet. Well, they haven't been quiet. They've been out blocking expressways and things like that, but no serious violence. And I think that makes sense from their point of view, but I'm not absolutely certain it would stay that way, because truly, the United States government is as much a factor in what's going on between Israel and Gaza as is the Israeli government. They're totally, I call it the Israeli-American axis. Okay, it's a partnership between the American government and the Israeli government. Now, how will this end? People keep saying, well, we should do a two-state solution. This was first put together. Well, actually, it was first put together back in the 181, UN 181 proposed a two-state solution, and then of course the Oslo Accords were a two-state solution. We hear a lot of people talking about a two-state solution. I have a Jewish neighbor who's a member of a group, I don't remember the name of it, who are supporting a two-state solution. There's a lot of support for a two-state solution. My question about that is, I don't think there'll ever be a two-state solution. If they did come up with something like that, what it would be what I call a 1.5 state solution. The Palestinian state that was created under a so-called two-state solution would never be a full state. They'd never have the full rights of having, control of their own affairs and a military, because Israel wouldn't go along with that. So there won't be a two-state solution. David Ramsey Steele, most of you know who David Ramsey Steele is, I assume. Yeah, David Ramsey Steele said, sitting, I think, in that chair right there, he said he thinks what's going to happen, his prediction, it's going to be a one-state solution. It'll be a Palestinian state where Jews will be welcome. That's his take on it. Okay.
What's
now,
the basis? How does he get to that take?
Well,
Yeah,
I've tried to ask him that, okay? I think David Ramsey Steele is one of the smartest people I know, and I love to hear him speak. But there's a couple of issues in which I think he's a little off base. He also says that Iran could destroy Israel at will. Okay, I'm skeptical of that.
Iran can beat the U.S.
Did he say that too? That I didn't hear him say, but he had some justification for that. He says, well, Iran has the Russian weapons, and the Russians now have some weapons that can get through the what do they call it, the dome, the Iron Dome, the hypersonic missiles, and I'm skeptical. And he admits, well, if they did, they would probably pay a fairly high price because Israel has nuclear weapons, and as of yet, they don't, or we don't think they do. That could change at any time. And so, one state, two state, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I'm pessimistic because if we look at some other situations, we look at the American situation. The first white people came to North America. I mean, there were some people who landed in the Caribbean area, but 1492, Columbus, etc. But the Pilgrims and the people who came to North America were primarily New England and then the Carolinas and so forth. That was around 1600, and they had encounters with the Native Americans. Many of them were friendly, some were not so friendly, but mostly at that point they were friendly. That relationship continued on until about 1880, which was the time the Indians finally threw in, waved the white flag. So that's what, almost 280 years, 260 years, 270 years that one took to be resolved, okay? Ireland, what was it, the Good Friday Agreement of, I don't know, a couple decades ago now, I guess, finally resolved that conflict, which it's now, at least for the time being, a state of peace in Northern Ireland. But that was a conflict that went on for 600 years, okay? So people can really dig in their heels on that. So I'm not very optimistic. I think that you know, and the Palestinians don't want to move. There's nobody, to my knowledge, that wants to have them, that's going to welcome them. The Egyptians and the Jordanians and all the other places that are being proposed, that Trump is saying, well, we'll move them to Egypt and to Saudi Arabia. And he hasn't talked to the Saudi Arabians and the Egyptians about that. So I'm pessimistic, and in our discussion, I want to hear if you people have any issues on that. And the other issue, there are a lot of other problems caused by this conflict, and the fact that our government is somewhat out of step with the rest of society. One of the issues is we've seen a huge increase in anti-Semitism since October 7th. A very big. I've heard the number, and I can't tell you where I heard it exactly, but that even here in Illinois, we've had a 300% increase. I don't know how they measure that, but I wouldn't doubt it. Okay, there's substantially more anti-Semitism now that is being caused by what's going on over there. And I hear about all these groups that want to fight anti-Semitism. I think the best way to fight anti-Semitism is to get Netanyahu and his cronies out of power, and that will reduce it right away. Because most of the Israelis do not support what he's doing. That would calm things a little bit. The others are effects on public policy. One thing in particular is educational policy. Now, our educational system has some built-in problems, okay? The figures used to be, and I think they're probably fairly similar, that higher education is paid for approximately 1/3 by tuitions and fees, 1/3 by government support, and 1/3 by philanthropy, okay? Roughly, and it'll differ obviously from institution to institution. But that 1/3 philanthropy has a lot of influence, okay? To wit, the presidents of Harvard and Penn, you all remember that, I suspect that was fairly recent. They were both, they say they resigned, they were effectively pushed out, okay? Because of the feeling that they were not, quotes, protecting Jewish students on their campuses, okay? When I hear that, I go into a short range and I say, certainly universities are responsible for protecting their students. I don't know of any students that have been seriously, on either side, that have been seriously, I think there was one case of a woman, of a Jewish woman being killed somewhere, but I don't think it was an educational institution. There was one Palestinian boy in our suburbs here that was killed. And I think, and one other Palestinian somewhere that was killed or beaten up. That's all the violence in the United States that I'm aware of. Now, you all may be aware of some other, and maybe if you call scuffles between police and demonstrators violence, I don't call that, you know, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about where people are seriously injured. In any case, when people say, well, the universities are responsible, yeah, they're responsible for protecting all students in all groups. But the primary purpose of any major university or college is education and research. Education and research. And that's what the guideline should be. And Lisa Panic, a congresswoman, I don't know if you remember her, she's from upstate New York, and she used the opportunity of having the television cameras on her during those hearings. I don't know if you remember that a couple of years ago, there were hearings, and the president of Harvard was quizzed, the president of Penn, I don't remember The president of Harvard was, I have her name somewhere, I don't remember what it is now. Let me see here. Claudine Gay, I believe, was her name. I don't remember the name of the president of Penn, but they were both accused of not supporting or protecting the Jewish students, and Lisa Panic said something to effect, "You're not fit to be president of these institutions, you should resign." Okay, and in the case of Claudine Gay, she was a black woman who had done a lot of work in getting minorities into Harvard, getting them the funding and so on to increase the diversity of the Harvard student body. But she was fired because she supposedly wasn't protecting her Jewish students. You know, I don't know. I can't relate to it because I've never been harassed the way some of these Jewish students probably were. But I think that's insane. When somebody who is doing presumably an otherwise good job at a major institution over something like that, it shows an inordinate amount of power for political reasons. Okay, because I think that's what Stepanek was looking for. She had the cameras on her and she wanted to seem tough, and she did. Although actually something similar to that happened here in Chicago at the University of Chicago. Some of you I know are familiar with John Mearsheimer. You know who John Mearsheimer was? He wrote a book exposing the activities of is it ACAP, the policy group, Israel's policy lobbying group. Okay, all countries, well, big countries anyway, and big corporations have lobbying groups in Washington. But he wrote a book which exposed some possibly inappropriate activities on the part of this group, and he became persona non grata among a lot of the alumni of the University of Chicago. I went to a lecture in which he was booed on a totally different topic after this book came out. And he had tenure. They couldn't fire him, but they kind of muzzled him for a while. And then there was a fellow by the name of Norman Finkelstein, who was Jewish, who was wanting to get tenure at DePaul, and he was denied. And they say, well, it had nothing to do with the fact he had made some anti-Israeli statements himself, and they say this had nothing to do with it. And then this fellow who had given $50 or more million to Harvard said something to the effect that he was going to take his money elsewhere. He was a successful, I think, a hedge fund manager, okay? And he said he was going to take his money somewhere else. And I don't know if you all remember Stephen Salita. Does that name ring a bell? Stephen Salita had been a professor at Virginia Tech, and he was offered a position at the University of Illinois, and he had tenure. Usually professors that are tenured don't move because then they lose their tenure, all right? And tenure is very valuable, obviously. They basically can't be fired except for extreme circumstances. And so University of Illinois offered him tenure. You come here and you have tenure immediately. Well, this was about the time of the Second Intifada, I believe, and he had made some very unpleasant statements about Israel. I read some. They were not. It was not a good choice of words that he used. But he was very critical of Israel for the way they handled some of the things that were going on. You know, he talked about children's bodies, children that were killed, and they put the bodies in ice cream coolers. Things like this, which got a lot of attention. As a result of that, Illinois withdrew the offer of tenure. And I have not, and I'm sure, I don't know, I haven't looked up, I'm sure there was a lawsuit, and I haven't had time to look up what the result of that was. And probably he did fine. Teachers who who are fired or demoted because of political issues usually win their lawsuits when there's a lawsuit. There was a lawsuit at Edmonton Township High School one of the other schools over something like that. But in any case, I had the opportunity to hear Stephen Salita speak at Northwestern. And during the Q&A, I asked him, I said, Mr. Salita, Professor, aren't we going to have this problem again and again? And I referred to John Mearsheimer, I referred to Norman Finkelstein. Aren't we going to have this problem until we fund higher education the way they fund higher education in Europe, which means it's paid by the state? There's essentially, there may be some small philanthropy, but it's not big. And the tuitions are zero or very little. And I said, until we do that, aren't we going to still have the same problems such as you had? And his answer floored me. Okay, he said, because these alumni then that are offended are holding back millions of dollars in donations. And he said, that's not the issue. He said to me, he said, $2 or $3 million to the University of Illinois is chump change. Those were his exact words. They don't care about the money. It's a branding issue. He said universities are trying and colleges are trying to brand themselves. And that answer surprised me, but he may be right. Now, so 2 or 3 million wasn't a big deal. Maybe $50 million. Of course, Harvard has $50 billion endowment, I think. And so to them, they were worried about losing the money. And I don't know. And Harvard is standing up now. This is not directly related to today's topic, but we know that Harvard is standing up. The government has cut off some funding to Harvard because they are not going along with some of Trump's plans, the getting rid of DEI and some other things. Okay, Columbia did go along. Yeah, I think, did you all hear about that? They were going to lose $400 million in government funding, and so they caved in and said, "Yeah, we'll do what President Trump wants us to do." And so they're getting their, but Harvard said no. So that's indirectly related. It's another aspect of the same problem. I guess that covers most of the points I wanted to cover. And if anybody has any questions or comments, let's move into that now. Thank you.
It's the 250th anniversary of Lexington and Concord today.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Oh, that I didn't.
Shot heard around the world.
Shot heard around the world. They've been talking about that on the radio. I didn't realize it was today.
Yeah, when you were talking about the founding of the U.S.
Of the U.S. Okay, good.
That's what they had.
Yeah.
So many weeks ago, I saw I could tell this is a pro-Zionist film called October 8th.
Oh.
It's told from a point of view of a pro-Israeli stance.
Yeah.
Two questions. According to the film, the pro-Palestinian protests that you often see in here and other cities are secretly funded by Hamas.
Uh-huh. Well, okay.
Like they showed us a chart of, I forgot the organization that runs these protests, but apparently it's either Hamas and then the Muslim Brotherhood secretly funding them.
Yeah.
And another question is, what did you think of the movie, if you've seen it?
What movie?
October 8th.
I didn't see it. Okay.
Yeah, so basically, according to its synopsis, it's basically the emergence of anti-Semitism on college campuses and social media and on the streets since October 7, 2023, when Hamas attacked Israel. Basically, I've seen the film. It basically talks about how, for example, a student that ran a pro-Jewish, student organization gets attacked and gets harassed by pro-Palestinians, and often they explained about how these chants, like from the river to the sea, are supposedly from Hamas.
All right. Well, I'm going to take that last part first. That's interesting, and I would like to maybe find, is that movie online somewhere?
I think it's still in theaters, but then there's going to be an online release.
Okay. From the river to the sea is a phrase which you hear from a lot of the Palestinian supporters now. The Hamas level, people that want to They don't want to share the land with the Jews. They don't want a two-state solution either.
The people who are in charge of the Palestinian people, the government. That's
Well,
what you're talking about. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, Hamas certainly, I don't think they want a two-state.
Who were voted into power? Just to
They
clarify,
were
that's-
voted, yes, they were.
That's who you're talking about, the official government of the Palestinian people.
Okay, now that's something I didn't talk about. Yes, Hamas
That's- I
was
just wanna
voted
clarify
into
that's who you're
power
talking about, right?
on 2008. Well, see, that's not that clear. 2008, Hamas was voted in, and they did many good things too, hospitals, schools, et cetera, but their philosophy or their stated goal, I think it's a stated goal, although David Ramsey still denied that. He's a supporter, he's a strong supporter of Hamas. He says, no, this is not part of their official line. I don't know. But a lot of Hamas people do want a one-state solution, Palestinian, not Jewish, okay? They were voted in 2008, and there hasn't been an election since. They kind of got control of things and became, I guess you'd say, a dictatorship of sorts, okay? And they control. That is true. What is harder to know is what the people of Gaza, do they support Hamas? Well, a lot of them obviously do, but some of them don't. There were some demonstrations just recently. I don't know if you heard about those in Gaza by Gazans who are anti-Hamas. Okay. On the other hand, I've heard reports that for all of the Hamas militants, the soldier military types that Israel is killing, and they've killed a lot, they're getting even more recruits from the people there. So, you
It's
know,
the fog of war. It's hard to tell.
yeah, it's very hard to tell. And of course, the Israelis will not let reporters in, okay? And now and of course they won't even allow aid in. But aid obviously is very important. But so is free flow of information. And they're
But
bringing
only on certain borders, not the Egyptian border. That doesn't count.
how do you mean?
Well, the Egyptians close the border also.
Oh, the
And we
Egyptian.
give,
Okay.
we've given, I looked it up, the last 25 years, about 1 or 2 billion per year to Egypt
Uh-huh.
from the U.S. government to
Uh-huh.
Egypt. Yet they've closed down the border
Oh.
to Gaza.
Yeah.
Saudis have not taken any Palestinian refugees, etc.
No, they don't want
But
to.
for some reason, we hold Israel to one standard. The rest of the region, we hold to a completely different standard.
Well, how do you mean that?
I mean, I just explained. It's obvious.
No. Well,
We give the justification for the criticism of the U.S. government and the Israeli government. Fine,
Yeah.
criticize the Israeli government, but people also criticize, like you said, we have the USA bombs killing children. Right?
Yeah.
We support Israel.
Yeah.
The U.S. However many billions we give, our taxpayer dollars. That same money is going to Egypt. That same money is going to other countries in the region.
You mean for military?
For what? We give it to them. We don't tell them what to do with it. We can't. They're sovereign
Okay.
nations.
I don't know about
We
that.
give them, do we know what Egypt does with the money that we give them?
I don't know.
No.
I don't know about that, and I think we give military aid, or we sell military hardware to almost anybody who wants to buy it.
Mhm.
Okay, probably not to Hamas, but almost
Saudis-
anybody.
Saudis,
So
yeah.
we probably do sell military hardware to Egypt and I think definitely to Saudi Arabia. I think Saudi Arabia, however, is getting some criticism, at least in the media, for the fact that they don't want to help. Okay. I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't see the quite the same comparison there.
Well,
But
there is no comparison because the criticism levied toward Israel is disproportionate. Like, I don't understand
by
the
who?
same-
By the media?
by people who who adhere to this binary of like you're either pro-Palestine or pro-Israel,
Okay.
or the criticism towards the Israeli government.
There is some criticism of the Israeli government from our government. There was by at least some by Joe Biden, and even Trump is saying, you know, we got to get things under control here. And there are a lot of individuals in the Congress who are very critical of the Israeli government. Nonetheless, we supply them with, I think maybe we held back a little bit for a little while, a few loads of bombs or something. There's very little holding back on that. And since it's a different thing, the Saudis and the Egyptians are not militarily involved. I think they closed their border, and I'm not an expert on this. I think they closed their border because they're scared that Palestinians are going to want to come in large numbers.
Okay, so the Saudis and the Egyptians are not militarily involved. Finish the rest of that sentence.
Well, I don't think they are, not to my knowledge.
Because they were not attacked by Hamas. So why would they be militarily involved if they were not attacked?
Okay, I don't. I'm somehow or another. I'm missing the point that you're trying to make. You're saying that we should be more critical of.
I'm saying people who take these positions of extreme criticism of Israel should apply that same standard to other countries in the region.
Well, there are no other countries in the region that, at least recently, that have done what Israel is doing to Gaza. I mean, I don't think. There have been, not that I can think of. Can you think of come up with some examples?
Yes, Egypt closed the border.
Well, they closed the border, but have they done bombing or artillery shelling? I mean,
if they were attacked by Hamas, I'm sure they would.
well, yeah.
Because as we said, they have the right to defend themselves.
Okay, that's fine. Well, we'll agree to disagree on that. Because I don't see it as quite in the same.
So if the Native Americans did, you use that kind of as an example.
Yeah.
You know, a parallel to the Palestinian situation. If Native Americans did an October 7th style attack, like say they started just randomly attacking American politicians, they have reservations, right? And their stated purpose would be like, yeah, we don't want to be on the reservations anymore. We want our own land, our own country, our own nation state.
Yeah.
And
I mean, today, if they
did something like that,
they would.
an October
they
7th
would
style, would you consider yourself pro Native American or pro USA?
At this point, you know, you're alluding to an uncomfortable question, which is one of the reasons that I bring it up, as I want people to be uncomfortable noting the parallels. I was talking about up to 1880 when there was bloodshed between Native Americans and the colonists, our people that were settling. If something like that happened today, that's interesting. I mean, there have been little things. The Indians took over some land here in Chicago a few years ago. You remember that? Yeah. There used to be a missile base, a Nike base up at Belmont Harbor, okay, which was supposed to be, this was back in the Cold War when, before ICBMs, when we thought we might be attacked by the Russians, okay, with bombers. Anybody remember this thing at all?
Mm-hmm.
There was,
Ringing a bell.
huh?
I said it's
There
ringing a
was
bell.
a missile base, and this was, there were various bases throughout from here, you know, into northern Canada to try and intercept these Russian planes that might be coming, okay? And there was a missile base there. Well, and sometime back, I think in the 70s, they said, well, we don't need this anymore. And they closed it. But I do remember that occasionally you drive up Lakeshore Drive and they'd have the missiles up. You could see the missiles, you know, they're almost as if ready to fire. Well, they bought sometime in the 70s. They said, these are way outdated. They got rid of it, and they turned it back into parkland. And a group of Native Americans said something to the effect of that certain, when government lands are not used for military purposes anymore, they go back to the Native Americans. Okay, and so a bunch of Native Americans went out there and built tents and set up teepees and this and that, and said, you know, this is our land. It was kind of a protest. It's not entirely different from what's going on, except that they took over this land for a little while, and I don't know how long they were there. A friend of mine who was a newspaper reporter managed to get a telephone line in and was getting some good stories out. This was quite a while ago, okay. But I mean, it's not what you're talking. You're talking
I'm talking about October 7th
physical
style.
violence. Yeah.
Yeah, let's say they chose a few different states in random and started attacking politicians or whatever, civilians, whatever.
Yeah.
What would
What side?
would you consider that an appropriate?
I would say that taking action against them
and obviously
would be appropriate.
Obviously, they don't have a military. They're just kind of like guerrilla style. And we
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
the
yeah.
proportion was, let's say the proportion of casualties was similar to what's going on in
All right.
Israel
So in
since
other
October
words,
7th.
let's say some of these Native Americans killed 1,200 people in a nearby town.
Let's say the proportion was the same.
And then
Whatever
the
it is.
American military
50
went
to
in
1
and
or
killed
whatever.
50,000 of them.
Yeah.
I would be very, very, very unhappy. And I played with another. Let me give you another maybe silly analogy in my mind. I'm Swedish, okay, and next to Sweden is a country called Norway, okay, and Sweden is bigger and has a more powerful military. And if Sweden were somehow oppressing Norway, okay, which occasionally they accuse each other of doing things like that, but not militarily. And the Norwegians came over to Sweden and killed 1,200 Swedes. And the Swedish military went back and took action against Norway. And if they killed 50,000 Norwegians, I'd be very, very upset. Even though my heritage is Swedish, I'd be very upset about it.
I would be upset too, but what does proportionality have anything to do with what's correct?
Well, that's a
what
question.
What if the Swedes kept saying, "Yeah, we're going to keep attacking you," or
Yeah.
the aggressor kept saying, "We're going to keep attacking you until we wipe you out."
Yeah.
And then, okay, we're going to keep defending ourselves at a rate of 50 to 1.
Yeah. Okay, so you're saying that Hamas still says that they're not done, is what you're saying. Hamas says
I'm not saying it. They're saying it.
they're saying it. Yeah, that's right.
They've been bombing every day
They've been
since
sending-
October 7th. They've
Yeah.
been bombing Israel. They've been
With
testing
rockets.
the
Yeah.
Iron Dome every day since October 7th.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I didn't know they were doing it every day. I know that they were doing it, and they have stated that their purpose, I think their purpose is still to have a one-state solution without Jews.
And they have hostages though.
And they still have hostages. Now that's another issue that has always blown my mind. Everybody has always been very concerned about the hostages on both sides. And to me, both sides were putting a little too much emphasis on this. Here we have 100 hostages, and we have two nations, two cultures that are facing an existential threat, okay? And I think that both sides should have said, we're sorry about the hostages, or Israel should have said, we're sorry about the hostages, but we can't let that be a concern. Because 100 or 200 people versus the existence of Israel, there's no issue there, okay? Now, Hamas, on the other hand, the hostages is all they have, okay? They don't have tanks, they don't have jet planes, they don't have good missiles. The only weapon that they have now is hostages. When those hostages are freed, They have nothing.
They have
8% of their infrastructure is left.
They have Hezbollah and they have Iran propping them up.
Well, they have allies to that extent, but they basically the weapon that they have now is the hostage. I'm not saying this is right, okay. I'm not saying that I hope they win. What I am saying is my whole view here is not pro-Hamas or even pro-Palestinian. It's anti-Israel, and
When
not
you
even
say- wait.
anti-Likud.
When you say anti-Israel, you're referring to the Israeli government.
Yes, Likud, the current Israeli
Okay,
government.
so if you have strong opinions about the Israeli government, you also have to have an opinion about the Palestinian government, or else it's a cop-out.
Well, maybe it's a cop-out. I don't support the note. I don't support the note that the notion that that the Arabs, including the Palestinians, necessarily have the right to kick the Jews out. Okay. All right. I don't support that. I don't know what I support. That's my problem. I don't think a two-state solution is going to solve it. A one-state Palestinian solution, probably not. The Jews would not accept that. They want their own homeland somewhere. And if the Likudis have their, not even the Zionists, the Likudis in specific, if they have their way, the whole area will be a one-state solution. I got off, you asked a question before, and I got off on something else about the river to the sea. The Arabs and the Palestinians have been using that, but the first time I heard that was several years ago. There was a panel on this topic. Now, obviously, it was before October 7th, but it was a panel on the Israeli-Palestinian situation. And there was a fairly right-wing Israeli on the panel, and he used that expression. He said, what we want to control the territory from the river to the sea. That's the first time I ever heard it. And I don't know
the
that
Israeli end.
Huh?
Coming from the Israeli end, not the Palestinian.
Coming from the Israeli. And I'm not sure that when it was clarified whether he meant the Jordan River or the Euphrates. I think he may have meant from the Euphrates to the sea, okay? Which is that's even a bigger thing, okay? But so that's the first time I heard it. And more recently, we're hearing it more from the Arab side. from
So
the
there's
Palestinians.
currently a one-state solution in effect in in Israel,
Yeah.
where 20% of the population is Palestinian or Arab, Muslim Arab.
Yeah, under occupation.
No, I'm talking about in Israel.
Oh, in Israel,
I'm
okay,
talking
yeah,
about in Israel,
yeah,
there's 20% of the population is one of them current. I don't know if it's currently still, but at one point, if not currently, an Arab was on the Supreme Court of
oh
the
yeah,
state of Israel.
yeah, and then they have members
So
in the
there's your
Knesset.
one-state solution.
They have
They-
members
they
in the
have-
Knesset.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's
Arab
your
members.
one-state solution. I don't know, like, what all this other talk is of we need another solution. Israel is a democratic state, nation state,
Yeah,
which they discriminate against people because they've been attacked for the last 75 years,
well, what do you
80
think?
years, and yes, of course they share the blame, but we share blame for genociding the Native Americans.
Yeah,
Do we support an uprising by the Native Americans? What's the statute of limitations? 80 years? Is that not long enough?
I don't know.
To figure it out?
It took 600 years in Northern Ireland and 200 and some years with the Native Americans. Okay, what about this? You seem to be favoring, maybe you're not, but let's talk about the possibility of a one-state solution covering the entire area. What is now Israel, all of Gaza, all of the West Bank, including right of return for Palestinians,
Mhm.
okay? A democratic, is that what you're suggesting might be
Yeah.
the best solution?
I have a question.
Well,
So,
then let's finish one point.
Yeah, I mean, that would
You
be
know what would
ideal.
happen with that?
That would be ideal. The Arabs would probably revolt or something, I don't know.
No, the Arabs wouldn't revolt. If we're a democracy, they would be in the majority, if not now, very soon.
They would
And that's-
demographically be in the majority.
They would
Well,
maybe
there's
not
another 2 million from Gaza that would be added.
2 million added plus the whole West Bank,
They would
plus
give
the
up
right of
40
return
30 or
people.
40%.
Huh?
Yeah, I'm not, I mean, the right of return, these are all like general.
Yeah, that, a lot of people, the Palestinians who are in the United States, for example, probably wouldn't go back. Some would go back, some wouldn't. So the problem, this is why Israel has a problem with that, and it's been acknowledged by some people that they would be a minority, and the whole purpose of having a Jewish state is they'd have to have a Jewish minority. They would not have a Jewish majority, and they would not have that in that circumstance. So yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I mean, I was just saying, whatever he's saying, that one state for Israel, would it, the same thing apply to Russia and Ukraine? Like, Russia to take the Ukraine in there because majority of the
Well,
Russian
Russia
people in there-
attacked Ukraine.
It doesn't matter who attacked you.
Oh, it doesn't matter who attacked who. Okay, so when
Yeah, but
Hitler
you're
attacked-
saying one state. I mean, it's just like everybody's attacking each other, but because Israel
Ideally, I want
20%.
one world state where there are no borders and
Yeah.
everybody gets along and we don't hate each
Yep.
other instead of 195. I mean, what's the correct number? Is 195 good for you, or do you want 194 where Ukraine is absorbed into Russia? So we have 194. What's the magic number?
There's no magic number there.
Okay,
There
so
should- but there
for me,
should-
there's no magic number.
But
The
there
magic
shouldn't be
number is
any
one.
countries deciding what to do in there. There shouldn't be United States in there deciding who's going to live and who's going to
The
die.
United States isn't deciding.
That's
Are
what
you
they're
a
doing.
member of the World
Hamas,
Federal?
Hamas is
That's-
deciding who lives and dies when they go and attack people.
Well, here's the thing that you asked about, like about the Professor Steele. Like he was
Yeah.
saying that like which one he thinks that Israel not going to exist.
Well,
I
he
mean,
said
yeah.
there's going to be a one state,
Yes.
but it'll be Palestinian.
Okay.
And that's what would happen if it became one state with a real democracy. It
Well,
would become Palestine.
So the question is, so why they're like, I mean, right now that Israel is in the middle of the countries that hate Israel. I mean,
Yeah.
so why are they still there? Why are they still alive? Why does Israel still exist? The question.
Because they have, one of the reasons is that they have, and I think Ben Gurion had 3 principles, and I don't remember what the other 2 are, but one of them is, if you're gonna fight a war, make sure you have a very large, powerful country on your side.
So-
and that's the United States.
I mean, we agree on
That's
that
why.
because of the United States, Israel still exists.
I think that it would be very problematic. I mean, before the United States gave the level of support they give now, the Arab world attempted to, there were at least 3 wars between the Arabs and Israel, all of which Israel held off. In fact, Israel conquered the Sinai for a while. So
Didn't they
it's,
give it back?
huh?
Didn't they give it back?
They
These
gave it back.
These
Yeah, they gave it back.
power-hungry, land-grabbing maniacs,
They gave it back.
gave
Well,
it
the
back.
reason.
Wait, how does that work?
How-
They
how-
power-hungry, land-grabbing maniacs gave this huge.
I didn't say
10
that.
times-
Wait a minute. I never said the Israelis were power hungry and land grabbing. Although I guess I am saying that because they do the Likud, not Israel in general. Not there's what 7 million people, 80% of which are Jewish, and most of those people do not like Netanyahu's policies. They do not like the Likud policies. So you know, however, the other policy that Likud has that you could call a land grabbing policy, but it's relatively smaller, the settlements. They keep adding settlements. They won't stop. And the United States has on several occasions tried to get them to stop, but they can't. Okay, it's a strange relationship there. There's a case where where the tail is wagging the dog, because the tail is Israel and the United States is the dog, but but we don't, they do what they want, and they have.
Wait, I thought the US controls everything, like a puppet master.
Not quite puppet masters. Not
Does
quite
the US
puppet
just snap their
masters.
fingers and just get
But there are certain things such as the settlements, which are illegal, according as my understanding, according to international law, according to treaties, whatever, and the Israelis are still doing it, and I mean, there are people in Israel and people in the United States who believe philosophically, sometimes partially for religious reasons, that Israel is entitled to that entire area. Okay, and they will quote the Bible, which says that they're the chosen people, and they'll say, we know that the Jewish people have been in that area for 5,000 years, etc., etc. And they believe that this is justification for giving the whole area to Israel. And what I come back with at that point is, well, that's fine, you can believe that, but it's a little dangerous for Americans to say that. Because if we say that the people that were there 1,000 years ago and they lost control 1,000 years ago, what about the people over here that lost control 200, 250, 300 years ago, like the Cherokee and the Apaches and the Ojibwe and all of the other tribes? What if they say, hey, we were here first, you guys got to go back to Europe? That's not going to happen, but the logic would apply in that case. So I do not buy into at all the archaeological and biblical reasoning for the existence of Israel where it is now. I buy into the notion that two aspects is that groups of people who are homogeneous within a non-homogeneous environment can petition for statehood. Okay, they won't necessarily get it, but they can petition. I mean, Eritrea, they were part of Ethiopia, right? They're now a separate country, and then Sudan split, and so there are these cases. Maybe that's what's going to happen in Ukraine, or it has happened to an extent. I mean, Crimea had majority Russian people, and now are part of Russia. So this happens. Now, of course, in our case, the southern states wanted to secede, and Lincoln said, and they were not successful in seceding. So,
They were.
they were for a while.
4 years.
Confederate money isn't very good anymore, though, except as a collector's item.
So, I mean, we agree that Israel still exists because of the United States, right?
Well,
I mean,
I would say it's.
If you imagine the U.S. never were behind them, Israel by themselves, like on their own.
Well,
Like
it's not quite that clear. I think that the Israelis are very dependent on the U.S., but on the other hand, there were those three wars. There was the war the 48 war, right after Israel gained independence. And then there was the 67 war and the 73 war. And all of those wars, you'd have to say Israel prevailed. Okay, so it's not entirely clear. See, one of the problems the Arabs have, does anybody here see the movie Lawrence of Arabia?
Does it count if I saw like an excerpt of it from pop culture or a clip of it?
Well, maybe. Lawrence of Arabia was about a guy by the name of, I don't remember what his real name was, but Lawrence, and he was a very pro-Arab British guy who worked on behalf of the Arabs primarily after, maybe up to and during and after World War I, and trying to get the Arabs to help their own cause by uniting, not necessarily uniting into one country, but uniting and standing together on things. And he couldn't do it, okay? The Arabs, they seemed to understand that they would be better off if they would unite, but they wouldn't do it. Did you see Lawrence of Arabia? You know what I'm talking about, okay. And that still seems to be the case. They don't seem to be able to unite. in a cause that they're all interested in. So I'm not quite 100% sure. It would certainly be a different situation.
Imagine like if United States wasn't behind them. You said 80% of the bombs they used on Gaza came from the United States, right?
Well,
so
yes.
imagine those 80% never came from the United States.
Yeah.
Nobody gave it to them. So
Yeah.
they would never have, they wouldn't have enough to
Yeah.
bomb all those territories in there.
Well, let's
They
put
wouldn't
it-
even start it because there's nothing to fight for it. Like,
Well, I think that if the United States were not supporting Israel, that the current situation would be different. Of course, first of all, the United States is not the only country that sells bombs to more or less anybody who puts up the bucks. So they probably, and Israel, one of the reasons I'm against aid to Israel, other than, even long before October 7th, is Israel, I think, is still getting a fair chunk of aid, which they don't need, because their per capita GDP is ahead of all but 2 or 3 countries in Western Europe. Okay, they're not quite at the American level yet, but of the countries in Western Europe, they don't need the aid. Okay, they needed it at first, and we gave them a lot of aid of all types when they were a young country, but they don't need it anymore. Now, as far as military weapons, they could probably get some of it elsewhere.
Well,
but
by purchasing,
by purchasing, and they have
where the money comes from.
Yeah.
Well, they have money. Israel, I'm telling you, Israel has a per capita GDP, and I'm not sure what the source of that is. They're high tech. They have a lot of high tech.
I know, but they got a lot of aid. Well, if you reduce your money from certain level to, let's say, half of it, it's pain. It may
Oh,
not
yeah,
be doable.
But
So without it, Israel will have to have second thoughts
I mean,
about everything that
you're good with your phone. Can you look up how much aid Israel is getting now, and as a percentage of their GDP? I don't think it's that much anymore, but it's
From
still
the US?
From the U.S. in particular, yeah.
I mean, by starting the war against Gaza, they had to shut down their economy and put all the people to, like, soldiers and stuff like that, send them to war. So now, I mean, those economies going to be struggling, and now you have to buy all the weapons all over the place, and that's going to cost a lot. That's completely destroy the economy.
Well,
they wouldn't have any of that stuff.
Let me put it this way: if they didn't have the United States supporting them to the extent that the United States is, especially with weapons, they probably would have approached the Gaza situation at least more slowly, okay, if not differently, okay?
By starting the war in Gaza, just let that sink in.
Yeah.
He just said by starting the war, Israel started the war in Gaza.
Okay, I'll get to that stuff. I
Well,
mean,
Israel,
Good.
I don't think it's entirely clear. Israel didn't necessarily start it, but it is because of Israel. It is because of the way Israel that was founded. I didn't cover this enough either. I did it in my first thought. The people who were involved in putting together 181, UN used Resolution 181, which is what was essentially the founding document for Israel, were all, as I call them, they were old, white, Christian, European men, okay, and that's the way things were done in those days. But the Arabs were not really given much of a say. Now, to the Arabs' own error, they did not participate as much. They boycotted some of these meetings because they felt that they were going to be ruled against anyway, which they were probably right. In my opinion, they still should have participated, but they did. But the people who made the decisions, again, old white Christian European men, made decisions for a totally different culture, people who are almost all a different religion. They're not all Muslim, but many of them are. And I quoted Churchill, about the Arabs mostly eating camel dung. I mean, this was the attitude. They looked down, and it was the attitude of European colonialists. These people are savages. They're uncivilized. They thought they didn't have a culture. They had a culture, and they had a society. It wasn't obviously one that the Europeans understood or cared about. And that same thinking was held by the people, the powers that be, in Europe in the time just before World War I and after World War I. They decided, and they cut up the Middle East according to, they drew up a map with countries of Iraq and Jordan and Lebanon and so forth, according to what they wanted to do. After World War I, they had the power to do it. They'd been part of the Ottoman Empire, and so they were ruled out of Constantinople. But it was a culture that was at least a little more similar to what they were used to, the same religion, somewhat similar culture. But when that ended, now they're being ruled by European Christians, and you're going to have conflicts there, and they did. And so I don't know what the solution is. I mean, we can't turn the clock back, I don't think.
You mentioned UN Resolution 181.
Yeah.
It was a two-state arrangement.
That was basically a two-state
And
arrangement.
it was
yes.
passed.
Huh? And it
So
was passed.
two-state, and with Israel and Palestinian state.
Yeah.
It was passed, but only Israel was established, but not the other states. So it was not 100% implemented? How does it work?
Yeah.
Because to this day, we're still waiting for the second state, but.
Well,
Is
that's
that-
right. That's right, and
that is
that
assumption.
is partially at the fault of the Palestinians and the Arabs, because as soon as Ben Gurion proclaimed independence for Israel in May of '48, I guess, the Arab world descended in an attack against the Israelis, okay? But the Israelis prevailed at that point. And then also in '63 and in '67 and '63, they prevailed. And so in a sense, if the Palestinians had agreed with this, now they didn't agree with it because their attitude was, all of this is our land. We're not happy with just some of it, okay? And in fact, 700,000 people were pushed out of what is now Israel because of this ruling, okay?
Yeah.
And so it was problematic. It was destined to fail, okay? Yeah.
First of all, thank you, Ernie, for researching everything.
Yeah.
That was great. I enjoyed hearing a lot of it. Two things. I think you just, Alex, right? Did you search the aid question?
I mean,
because
it's-
I have two answers. I wanted to know which have.
It's like tens of billion. Your question was in recent years or since independence?
Well,
Israel?
if you have a few key years, I'd be interested, because I think it's gone down, but I'm not
I
sure.
don't have my glasses.
I have three pieces of information. I'll share them and
Okay.
choose to.
Yeah, we're free for all now, so
Yeah.
let's discuss,
So-
we'll debate.
I have a thought too as soon as you.
Sure. And
Do you want to keep recording it?
Still
What?
recording.
Okay, I'll just read the first
He's
sentence.
gonna edit it.
Israel is
Huh?
the largest
Oh, I don't
cumulative
do it.
recipient
I don't have
of
the
U.S.
skill.
foreign aid.
Wait a second, go ahead, go ahead.
Excuse me, I'll start again. Israel is the largest cumulative recipient of U.S. foreign aid up to February 2022.
Oh,
I have another statistic after this. The U.S. has provided Israel U.S. $150 billion, which is non-inflation adjusted.
okay.
150 billion total over
Cumulative, yes.
Historically.
Yes. Adjusting for inflation, that number goes to 310 billion. Another number, which is just pulling up here,
And now, what period does that cover, from 1948 up until?
23.
23.
And now there's
48.
one more piece of information. In the year 2024, as in the past year
Yeah.
that has elapsed, the U.S. gave 17.9 billion to Israel in 2024.
Okay.
Okay, and just another point, Alex I used to work in international funds like this before, and it's almost never the case that suppose Eric is the US and I'm X country, be I'm Egypt, be I'm Israel, be I'm Ukraine, be I'm Bangladesh, or any random country.
Yeah.
It's never that Eric will just give me a blank check or like a basket of money
Yeah.
and say, here, go spend on as you please. There's like, every dollar is essentially proportion that this much is for buying weapons, this much is for food aid, this much is for rebuilding these things. It's very structured.
Yes.
It's not that,
Just very quickly,
yeah,
yes, and I thought about that as I was saying it,
okay.
but there's no way for the U.S. to have accountability or transparency because they're going to distribute it as they please because we don't have eyes inside. So in a practical sense, there's no way to hold these people. But anyway,
Here's a question about that. Does it matter who you are if you're the recipient? If you're okay, so the country that came up is like really being on the end of like getting screwed over by the raising tariff rates, like Lesotho. Like if you're Lesotho, you might be in a different position than Israel to just say screw you on the conditions.
Yeah.
Like if you're more economically dependent one way or the other.
maybe.
So maybe it depends on what kind of resources you already have and what
It's
your
easier
status
for some
is.
countries to. Can you shed any light on that? Because I was thinking about that as I was saying. Like, is there a way?
Would the U.S. open like non-profit organizations in those countries and fund them, and those organizations gonna spend them whatever the government is telling them to spend to?
I'm someone who.
So they keep the influence on whatever they do in it.
I see what
Is
you're
there
saying.
a way to hold countries accountable and say, hey, we told you to use it on this, this, and this, and you're using it on something else? Would we even know what they're using it for?
Isn't a lot of it goods and product? In other words, a lot of the aid might be food or something like that, or equipment.
Yeah,
Okay.
in Ukraine, a lot of it is
It's
old,
equipment,
old equipment
okay.
that we weren't using that we gave.
Or maybe old, new, whatever. It's equipment, but it's American-made equipment, and therefore it still comes into the dollar totals.
Mhm.
I would believe. Yeah. Did your figure show what percentage of that was military and non-military?
No, I didn't
Yeah.
bother clicking any tabs
Okay.
because the second I click it, I'll be like spam with stuff going forward.
Yeah.
I'm just reading just the excerpts which I'm provided by.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
not interested in it like forcefully just feeding me information in the future. A few things.
Yeah.
So based on what you said and what both of you said,
Yeah.
is there a way to track like accountability? I think that varies on a country to country basis. Like for example, I think one of the biggest things is like how strong is the relationship between the two countries and then the people on the ground, because oftentimes there's information discrepancies that just follow their way up, right? Like I think there was an interesting study about the fall of Iraq.
Yeah.
And they say that actually everything was good. It was corruption that led to this because they started billing very randomly, very arbitrarily, and there was no checks and balances, and that led
Yeah.
to the downfall of it all. Despite getting funding and stuff, that led to the downfall. I think, but your question is valid, as in like, is there a question of checks and balances, there accountability? I don't know how well it goes. I don't know if after every year do they meet and say, hey, we gave you X last year, show the breakdown of X, prove that it was spent on these things. I don't know if that
We
happens.
can't even do that domestically.
Yeah, so
Okay, so how would we
rightfully
do
so.
it?
In theory, there would be, but in actuality, I feel it's probably not as much. To your question about the non-profits and things like that you mentioned, right?
USAID especially.
Exactly. So I know that USAID in the past, time is very fuzzy for me now. If it was in the last 1 month, probably not last 1 month. Tariff was the buzzword last 1 month. Prior to that, there was a whole thing about USAID being cut
Yeah.
to multiple partners around the world. The effects of that, I personally have never actually read about it yet. There's been, I think by the time I was sitting down to start reading about what this means, because I don't know what it means.
Yeah.
Once I sat down to start thinking about what this means, tariffs just tip over, and then like I lost my.
Yeah.
I was unable to keep up with it, to be very frank. So I actually don't know, but I feel that some of these groups, these non-profits, they were probably heavily impacted, and they were probably set up for this purpose.
Yeah.
So how much, I don't know. I wish I knew. I
You know
want
that
to know.
There was like one other thing about recently I think it was somewhere in the news and that they're saying like Ukraine, for example, USA, they finance 80% of all their mass media. Like
Okay.
80% of whatever is in Ukraine, financed by USA, and 20% by the Europe. So Ukraine doesn't have their own finance mass media. So it's pretty much all the money from the United States, it went to the USA that had non-profits in there, and they're the ones distribute the money where they wanted to distribute to control the mass media in there. So they go and say, okay, this is our newspaper, we'll give it to you. This is our radio station, we'll give it to you. No, this is not ours, get out of here. We'll give it to you, we'll give it to you. So that's why they keep the influence in those countries in there. The money they give them, they wouldn't just give it, hey guys, just grab it, whatever, we don't need it.
Are you, I'm not asking this in a weird way, but are you from Ukraine?
No, from Russia.
Okay, I would be curious,
Yeah.
as per what you're saying, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, you can research that.
Yeah, I
so.
would like to see how those organizations, like those
Yeah.
printing presses, ABC magazine, BCE magazine, whatever their names are, what are they doing now, or what has happened to them? Because
Mhm.
if what you're saying is happening,
And they were
Yeah.
closing it.
Oh, so they've been
Yeah,
closed.
they closed
Okay.
it.
I just-
Unless now they can reopen it, because
Voice
when they actually stopped their financing, when Trump came and said that we're stopping all that stuff in there, they were shutting down. All
Voice
the
of
newspapers
America.
in there, and they
Okay,
were,
okay,
and they would start
sure.
asking people in Ukraine to actually start giving them the money so that way they're not
Voice of
gonna close.
America is being shut down by Trump. I don't know about shut down, but like significantly. And Voice of America has been around. Sorry, Dave.
Going
Dave.
back, yeah.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to ask you, so you believe that all Ukrainian media is more or less funded by US aid, so what would you say about the Russian language media that comes from like the east of Ukraine? Do you think that's funded by Russia?
I mean, now most of the, like, whatever the media is there is all controlled by the United States in there. Like I said, only Donbass, they're the one who's actually, like, fighting for independence. They're the one who try to keep it, like, whatever that, without getting that influence from them, so.
Does every country, does anybody think that the US is the only country that does this sort of soft power where, you know, we have Voice of America, we have USAID, do other countries do that? Do you believe other countries also use that form of soft power throughout the world?
Absolutely.
I mean,
Probably not
Russia
as much-
has the Russian TV network in the US.
Yeah, they had it.
RT,
It
they
was
had
shut down, actually.
Yeah.
It was,
I used
they
to like
actually,
RT.
the,
Why
they
is it
actually-
thing for a
the
while?
only Russian TV is called RT, Russia Today. It was shut down in the United States and
Yeah.
Europe and all over the world. It was shut down because, they didn't want to send the different opinions to actually say.
I'm talking about like, cause USAID you're saying is kinda like lying about what their purpose is, right? You're saying they're,
Well, here's the thing. If I officially, like Russian, open the news, like a news channels in here, it's a Russian news channel. Everybody knows it. It's Russian. So if you want to know the Russian opinion, go watch it.
Yeah.
But if I'm Russian, come and buy like CNN, like without even you knowing it. And I start giving them the money, saying, hey, you know what, I'm just helping the United States, but I'm sending the money to the CNN. And now they start, pushing the Russian propaganda. I mean, and then I'll buy more newspaper. I'll buy 80% of all the newspapers and all the channels in there.
Are you familiar?
And they're gonna be telling whatever like Russia wanna do, whatever.
do you
want,
think
know.
Russia does that?
No, they cannot do that.
Are you familiar with Tim Pool? He's
Are you
a-
familiar with the TikTok?
Yes.
Why they want to take away from China?
Hang on.
Why?
You're
just
changing
hold on,
topic.
hold
You're
on.
changing
No,
topic.
I'm just keep on the topic. Why the United States want to get the
I
control
don't
of
know,
the
you gotta
TikTok?
ask Trump,
Well, you tell me your opinion.
because it's a national, some people say it's a national security threat. I'm on the fence on the TikTok issue, but Tim Pool is a very famous, he's made a lot of money on YouTube. He was, at the beginning, he was kind of like a liberal Democrat sort of, and over the last like 5 to 10 years, he's become a Trump person, a conservative, whatever you want to call him. It was recently, in the last 6 months or so, revealed that he got a bunch of money from just a check, a random check for like, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever the amount was. It was a very significant amount of money, as well as other YouTubers. It was from Russia. He claims he didn't know where it came from, but it was basically to push like the Tucker Carlson narrative of the Trump narrative of Russia good, US bad, deep state bad. So that's out in the open. So for anyone to say that the US is the only country or superpower country that does use this kind of soft power or underhanded methods of like asymmetrical influence or warfare or whatever is, I mean, it's very naive
Yeah.
for you to say that you don't think Russia does it with
Well, I
with
mean-
bots and with We all know it.
US,
It's okay.
US has unlimited amount of money in there. They have unlimited like amount of influence that they can actually put on the other countries in there. Other countries don't have any influence in the United States. Like nobody can actually from there come over here and buy the channels or whatever you want. That's why they want to control the TikTok. TikTok is controlled by China, so they can actually push their agenda on Americans in there, and that's what they're afraid of.
So the
But
country,
They need to
social
have a-
media, social media, Russia was supposedly doing a lot of things, I have no reason to disbelieve it, that they were attempting to affect American election. And
Yeah.
I mean, people have a right to.
They actually, you know,
affect-
they did investigation on the previous one when the Trump won. They said that Russia financed all of that stuff in there, the big stuff in there. That
Yeah.
they did investigation. Look at the results of that investigation.
I don't know, well,
They
did?
they didn't find anything.
Yeah.
Even though the Democrats they push it that the Russia financed, they spent all the money. They said they spent $1 on the Facebook advertisement. That's what they found. They said because of the dollar, that's how they showed the Trump.
I support Russia's right to wield soft power in the United States. It's a matter of free speech. They should, just like we should be able to go to any country in the world and have Voice of America or whatever. It's all fair.
Yeah.
It's
So
all free speech.
what happened to Russia today?
Russia today,
Yeah.
I was under the
I mean,
impression that they're still operating.
You see what happens to them.
No, I think they, a couple years ago. I used to like that, they used to have good-looking ladies that were the random people.
They said it was one of the most popular channels in there. Everybody watched it, and
I know a
because
lot
they
of
actually
people, yeah.
they said different opinion. But now it's closed. It's
Yeah.
shut down in there.
It's not even on YouTube.
Yeah, they
Maybe
closed it on YouTube everywhere.
Maybe they just weren't
closed it.
making enough money. I don't know.
No, I mean
No, it was shut down.
it was shut down
Shut
officially.
down by who?
United States
Yeah, by
officially.
law, yeah.
It
The
was
US
shut down by
law.
law.
Really? What about Al Jazeera?
Oh,
They're
there's
not
no
here anymore.
dispute.
Are they here?
It's been more than 2
Al
years.
Jazeera's still here?
I was a fan, but it's not available. You can get on
you say
YouTube,
still
try
here
to see
as
it.
in
Try to look
covering
for it.
news here or still open to?
They said is a threat to the U.S. Whatever, like you were mentioning about the agreement. Yeah, that's exactly how they mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah, recently they just said it on TV, like officially, just like a month ago. They said it. They said it is the biggest threat to the United States, the Russia today.
It happens all the time. UK want to shut down some Chinese broadcaster, and the Chinese reciprocate by banning TBC. And then they compromise. And then they compromise after 6 months or something. It's probably open or partially open. I didn't know the detail, but that happens. Not just US. So people do that all the time.
Didn't we talk in one of the other discussions here a few months ago maybe that there's equivalents of like Russia Today, there's Chinese and Japanese I think equivalents that you can
Yeah,
see.
and HK World.
Yeah, I mean you can still I mean to what degree do we think those are examples of soft power or not?
Well, in Japan's case, there are just soft power outside of NHK. You've probably heard of like their
Yeah.
animation is making it big as well
Mhm.
as their music and really popular with the young people. So, but also I believe that they also, Japan and America are like allies, and I believe that America has something to do with funneling Japan's pop culture.
You know, the difference between the soft power is like if you, different country opened officially a channel from, like they said, okay, this is the Russian channel, you can see the Russian, whatever, they broadcast it to you. But what the soft power in here, when they buy their own channels, newspapers and stuff like that, and some people don't even know like who bought them and who actually owned them, and they pushing their agenda, and people just like, I mean, they don't know, like I said, like Ukraine right now, 80% of whatever the mass media is actually US. And 20% is Europe. Nothing belongs to the Ukrainian. I mean, it's just like, how can you have like Ukraine, independent country, and you don't have any of your own like channels or newspapers or something like that actually broadcasting like your opinion, like I'm the, you know, this is Ukraine, this is my opinion. No, 80% is the US, 20% is Europe. That's it's not really a soft power. I mean, this is just like you lost your independence. I mean, it's
So
not yours
RT
anymore.
America was not shut down by the government. They ceased operations because they were dropped by Roku and Dish Network or Dish DirecTV, one of the two.
It's
But,
not in the US. The company is still there. You can get on their website if you really want
But
to.
the government, the United States government did not. I'm just correcting the record here. The United States government did not shut down.
Okay, yeah.
RT
I mean,
America.
they just dropped it from this network, that network, and
And
they closed it on the YouTube
I have,
and
I
everywhere.
have,
else.
here, let's see, about 36 television channels from Russia on my phone right now. It's live TV, I could bring them up right now.
Right. Shutdown is a very, very rough.
So this is a direct line.
terminology. It's they have ways to cut you here, cut you there. The companies probably shut down. They
Well,
still have ways, but
Eric, they were not
it's
shut down.
curtailed. It's
Two people in this meetup today said that the US government shut down RT.
Right, we need to
RT
refine that
America.
terminology.
RT
Yeah, true.
America.
You're right. We need to refine the terminology. Good that you diligently
And
look into it.
the idea-
But they curtail the availability of RT.
The idea that Russia is not able to broadcast in the US, it's soft power.
They curtail.
I have right here TV.garden, highly recommended that you check out this website. It's TV Garden, TV.grdn. You could tune into any, or not any, but many
Yeah.
live TV stations
Yeah,
around the world.
it's a
all
website.
free.
It's a website with a bunch of world channels in there. But can I go to the U.S. network and or whatever and watch it on TV in here? Like,
Yes, right here.
I'm talking about not internet. I'm talking about just turn on the whatever the cable TV. It
What's
used to
the
be on,
difference?
it used to be on cable TV.
What's
like
the difference?
It seems like it's a difference of convenience.
yeah.
I mean, if you wanna,
Wait,
It's
are
not-
you saying this is not as convenient as going to my home and then getting remote
Yeah.
control?
no,
from
you
the-
can,
Well,
it could be
okay.
convenient for you,
Well,
but it's a matter of law.
Here's
It's a matter of intention, it's a matter of law. You cannot, I can't deny that US government has the intention to shut it down. But as a matter of law, they're not able to do it 100%. They just use the law, oh, this part we can do, like YouTube. You're not gonna carry RT. They're able to do that by law. But that, for some reason, by law, they are not able to do that. Or even before the ownership of that platform is probably not US. For whatever reason, they're not able to do that. But I will not dispute that US intention, which is to shut it down.
Yeah.
That's why it's partially shut down, because the US has intention, but it doesn't have the full capability to shut down. That's why you're still able to find it here and there.
I feel like that makes everybody kind of right here, because maybe the U.S. has the intention to shut it down, but maybe it's not able to now. Depending on what your streaming and viewing habits are, maybe it's in our generation on down, it's perfectly easy to go on our smartphone and just pull things up. If we're the generation that's in the next range above us, that's maybe used to getting things on TV, or maybe like Roku, what Roku and Netflix decide to make available to the wider public versus what they put more limits on, maybe that has a difference on what people are going to access or not. It's complicated. It seems
Well, it's
like
complicated.
there's efforts to restrict it, which may impact some people but not others.
Right,
Or maybe
it's about
efforts are more
law,
or
it's
less
technology.
Most
But
people
I think
actually-
what matters to me is the intention. For a country or for culture based on, has the constitution to protect the First Amendment right, they have the intention, and they want to do
Who
it
is
to the fullest.
intending to shut down the Russian voice in the US? You're saying
US
the US
government, US
okay,
government,
can
yeah.
you provide some evidence to that?
Can you find it on YouTube?
Who does,
Can you
who
find it
shut
on
it down?
YouTube?
Who
Find
shut
it.
it down?
YouTube.
Find what?
If not
you-
US
YouTube. The
government.
Russia Today. YouTube.
Russia Today? I
Yeah.
guarantee you I can get Russia Today
Oh.
on my phone.
Try to find on YouTube. YouTube. They had a
YouTube
channel.
is a private company, they're
It-
not
it-
the United States government.
It's YouTube. It's American company. It's a freedom of speech, right?
So I give you an
So if I go
example.
to YouTube and I say, YouTube, I'm gonna be showing, I don't know. Actually, I can go on YouTube and you're saying,
so
you're
you
saying
mean-
when
so
I
you
sign
mean-
up to YouTube and sign the terms.
So
and
you mean the
conditions-
U.S. don't have any control of the social media? They don't have any control of Facebook or whatever. So every time they bring in Mark Zuckerberg and they ask you, "Hey, what the hell are you doing? And then why are you advertising this? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this for our elections and stuff?" So he's just like, "Yeah,
That's why
yeah,
you
I'm
can
doing
go
it."
on. That's why you can go on Facebook and see somebody talking about pro-Russian stuff, you pro-Israel, pro-Palestine. Am I saying something that's not true? You can see every single, what people complain about, too much information coming. We have too much information.
It's one-sided, too much
You're
one-sided
right.
information. That's the problem.
Right, in terms of
One-sided.
proportion, which side matters. You know, I give you an example. In China, you can say Facebook's shut down, Twitter, now X is shut because they're not allowed in. But Chinese people are still able to access it through VPN. So it's a matter of technology, right? Chinese law in that term is pretty simple. You're not allowed in, you're not allowed to do business in this country. But people are still, it's a matter of technology, people are still able to access. So what's the point of doing it from the Chinese government standpoint? To curtail it. So they make it harder to curtail it. Less of the population will have easy access to it. You can extend that same analogy or logic from the U.S. standpoint, right? U.S. law is probably more complex in terms of who's to shut down, or is it difficult? It's a matter of law because the U.S. does have the Constitution protecting First Amendment right. You have to get around it to have a law that enable you to shut it down. And the other side is a matter of technology. That's probably partially explain why you're still able to relatively easy for you to access certain RT access channel. But what matters to me is intention, because I'm more interested in that, because you have the intention despite all your values that you proclaim, you still do that thing in the name of whatever.
So Eric,
shut down channels or TikTok.
I'm really curious here. So I think the evidence from the news the last 20 plus years, no question suggests that China's evidence is to limit access to Facebook and other things. Now, to the point of technology, what percentage of the Chinese, if it's possible to still to some degree access Facebook, etc., what percentage of the population has that technology? Like, how many people have smartphones? How many people have TVs, computers, and can get?
I don't have that
Do you know that?
statistic.
We need Mike.
I don't think anybody has that statistic. Also depends on the region. Maybe more prosperous regions,
Yeah.
Coastal regions, you have higher population with their access, they're willing to use that access. The other side part of the population, they just don't bother. Okay, we don't have access to Facebook. We have our own thing equivalent to Facebook. They don't bother. Also, it depends on the age range or the education, or whether you are individually tech savvy. Although VPN nowadays make it very, very easy to do. Because technology always make it more user friendly.
So I have a question about the soft power in there. So the China has a lot of money right now. So what's the soft power for the China here in the United States?
TikTok.
Okay, what happened to TikTok?
TikTok, I have it up on my phone right now.
So
Like me
they're forcing it to
show
sell
you.
it. Yeah, it's still open. Yeah, they're still forcing it.
There's a
It's
Trump
still like
video on it.
the Trump
There's a little red note. There's a red note. That's arguably more soft power than TikTok.
Was that shut down yet?
But those are not. Well, that's a matter of law. That's what they're fighting it. They're fighting TikTok, but they're not fighting red note because they haven't. From the U.S. standpoint, they haven't resolved the TikTok issue yet. They haven't gotten to the red note. But one day maybe it will get to the red note, especially if U.S. successfully shut down TikTok, meaning transfer the TikTok ownership to some U.S. government. Maybe they say, hey, we can take the momentum, we aim at red note next. But right now, TikTok is blocking the way.
It's more popular. It's the video. It's actually targeting the younger generation there. That's why they actually go after TikTok in there.
Yeah, you can trace TikTok
visual is always
ownership,
it's
governance
easier like to digest.
to Chinese state, but you cannot trace red note ownership to Chinese state. Meaning red note has nothing to do with Chinese state, Beijing. But TikTok's parent company, the government has some kind of golden share over the parent company of TikTok. That's how they trace ByteDance. That's how they trace. They can argue because soft power or influence from the Chinese state. We need to control TikTok, transfer ownership to American hands, or shut it down. So to this, right now, at this point, Chinese stance still, either we keep TikTok or we're gonna let you shut down. We're not gonna transfer it to the US hands. As at this point, that's still their stance. But nobody's talking about Red Note. And arguably, Red Note has more influence than TikTok.
I'm just wondering why they're not doing it, and maybe it's under their control or something like that. There's a reason.
Which one?
The Red Note you mentioned.
Not that I'm aware.
I'm just, that's interesting. I need to research why they're not even pushing that.
Because
Red Note.
people, especially Americans, right, they tend to exaggerate the Chinese government's influence. If they're not even talk about Red Note in that way, I guess it's safe to say there's none. There's none.
Well, Red Note
influence
is
administration.
only a couple months old in the US. Right?
US
3 months or something?
Okay, you wanna give it more time, you can give it more time. But from my standpoint, if at this point, if no one says, hey, raise a flag, red flag about Red Note, about Chinese government influence, it's probably isn't. Because US has a motivation, has a tendency to make it up or exaggerate it. Even they're silent on that. You want to give more time? 2 months is not enough time? To me, it is, but to you, it's not. Okay, we can come back another 3 months. I bet money still isn't.
TikTok, I remember seeing the first TikTok ads. It took many months for it to get even to a fraction of what it is today.
No, the influence, they dig out the evidence of influence, right? That they track it back to
there's the
government. It
they.
doesn't take that long.
The
It
they,
doesn't really
I
take
would
that
like
long.
to find out who the they is. That's something.
Yeah, I wouldn't
because
argue, I wouldn't wanna spend
It's
time.
always the they. I wanna know who the they is.
That's a good question.
Just-
Go research.
Many people, they think tank or government itself, FBI, plenty of people, that's why we say they. It's not that because they're transgender or something. It's just, it's just they. I don't have
No,
to.
no,
It's
you don't have to edit that.
self-evident. It's so self-evident that I don't care to specify the proposition.
The people who's extroverted thinking they always need a fact. Give me the fact. If you don't know who, it's not a fact. That's why
But I
you
cannot-
never get the answer. They're never gonna tell you who is really making the decision.
yeah.
In the United States, nobody's making the decision. Like you have no idea who made the decision, and that's the reason why. Because you cannot trace it back and say, "This is the guy right here. This is my."
We don't have to. Anybody voice their opinion, raise the evidence, there you go. But right now, there isn't. I can't prove negative, but I can tell you, you the one, burden's on you to tell me who has raised the evidence. But your argument, which is a valid one, not enough time. I would reluctant to debate on that point because it's kind of subjective on my part, on your part too. But let's give it more time. Logically, I don't think we don't have enough time. Over time, you will still get the same result because it's an internet age. You Google, you get a lot of information. Well, you do more deeper research than Google, I'll give you a week or 2 months, right? But I wouldn't argue over that point even. But I have confidence. If we haven't heard about Red Note being controlled by Communist Party of China, it's probably isn't.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the whole point of Red Note, the name and the logo itself is based on like Chairman Mao?
Yeah, they're just being funny. They're just being funny. I know. The Chinese people, you may not know, they have a certain sense of humor. Today I caught a video, like a meme, since J.D. Vance called Chinese people peasants. There are a lot of memes. Today I just came across a memes. It's like some smart guy in the Chinese internet. They make up. There's a Chinese propaganda in the old days to boost the morale, to be loyal to the country, work hard for the country, for the even Chinese Communist Party. You're in the farmland, in the factory.
Yeah,
you work hard. They have this patriotic song in the background. And that meme changed that all to make America great again. You have Trump, you have those politicians, Elon Musk, they work in the field, they work in the factory to make America great again. With that, so that's the same kind of idea apply to a red note. Okay, that's the past. That's not pleasant for us. We don't ever want to live like that before. We want to go back. But hey, we think it's fun to use it to make fun of someone else. It's not like it's so painful. We don't want to touch it. Like some of your patients, the painful memory. They want to just don't want to touch it. But in this case, a lot of cases in Chinese case, they not only want to touch it, they use it to poke fun of other people in this day with the memory they themselves don't want to go back on. But they have no problem using it for fun.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just two things. Just so I'm aware of what's going on. This is a very interesting debate. So, correct me if I'm wrong. Like when you Alex, you used the word red book.
Red note.
Right,
Red note.
It's red book.
Yeah.
Red book, that means red book,
translation.
yeah.
So, I've heard of it only being in the U.S. in the past few months, right? Like X months,
Yeah.
not like 10 years, right?
Correct.
Okay. And did it
going?
see
See your
your
eyes,
picture?
good to you.
Was
Good to
it
see
just
everybody.
was it just because there was an outage, or was an outage of TikTok, or was there a new app that was launched here? I'm not sure the mechanics.
No, the thing is, Red Note, as you know it, was launched in China in like 2020 or 2021, and
No, so
Right, it's newer than TikTok.
no,
Smaller
so
than TikTok.
Xiaohongshu, I argue with you, Eric, because in Shanghai, where I used to live, one of my friends used to work at Xiaohongshu. I've been to the office, the headquarters of Xiaohongshu in the year 2016.
And what is that company now?
Xiaohongshu
So it's
is the translation
So
of.
it's not
of the-
necessarily newer than
No,
TikTok.
I left China in 2020, and I have eaten inside their office. Like it was
Right,
doing
right.
something before.
But is it TikTok newer than Xiaohongshu? Or
Oh, this is
Or it
a
doesn't
chicken and
matter.
egg problem. I wish I could tell you
It
because
doesn't matter,
I
okay.
personally on my phone it's like void of all social media. So
I think I might have seen something about Red Note being a bit older than TikTok.
okay, fair enough. But
What's the
Red
point?
Note's presence in the U.S. is it? You're saying it's a standalone app here?
I
Is
think
that
it was
has
like
come
an
up?
overnight sensation type thing. I have
Okay.
a friend. He's married to a woman from China.
yeah,
He's-
that
he's
guy.
re-
You should.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
bring
you met
him.
him.
You should bring him. Yeah.
And he was texting me.
What's it?
Oh, you
College,
have to download Red Note.
college.
It's so amazing. It's so great. You're gonna see how wonderful China is. And this was like around that same time, I think. So
And
I'd say
the
3 to 4
overnight
months.
sensation, because I think it came on the news as well, but I don't
Yeah.
remember why there was this overnight sensation.
Because
Okay, let
let's
me
say-
give you this. The difference between Xiaohongshu and TikTok. Number one, TikTok, there's an American company or American subsidiary called TikTok. Xiaohongshu isn't. So the American, they have American foothold. TikTok has American foothold because there's an American company branch with under TikTok.
Mhm.
So American government can shut it down. But Xiaohongshu
Okay.
isn't. So how do Americans access Xiaohongshu?
Yeah.
They through the internet. This is the internet. So
Because we have an open internet here.
yeah, and Chinese government does not block outward. They only block inward. And so so American audience can access Xiaohongshu because the Chinese government doesn't block outward, and a Chinese audience can interact with Americans directly. Although Chinese, they don't block outward, but when the Americans reply to some Chinese guy within China, it's probably you probably use VPN. So they
Okay.
for Americans it's no problem because Americans open the internet.
So there is no
China doesn't
standalone
block
app here,
out,
right?
but when Americans say, if you message me, if I'm in China, you're in the US, you message me, how do I get it, right? Since it's blocked.
Right.
But inward, that way it's blocked.
Okay.
I probably on VPN.
So there is no like Red app in the U.S. App Store. Like if
Right.
I want to if I want to do it right now,
Oh.
I would have to go to the Chinese App Store. Like the app is hosted in China. I'm downloading it from there, right?
No, I
There's
should
a
download
local
it. Yeah,
app?
you can do it. You can do that. So they block. So that's a good question. TikTok, they block the App Store. They block the App
Right.
Store. I think they block. That's the key thing.
Douyin.
If they block the App Store, also you're not allowed to block in a way that you're not allowed to install it. You're not able to install it. You're not able to upgrade it. So
Okay.
over time, it will wither away. I think that's the way you they plan to block TikTok. So in that way, they should be able to block Xiaohongshu as well.
Okay.
So see, I don't know everything, but I know that they're aiming at TikTok right now. Maybe they are able to deal with Xiaohongshu. Maybe they will not be.
It would be interesting
maybe
if any one of us actually uses these.
Yeah, I use both. I
okay,
just don't get on all the time. I have
I
both
like
installed on
Twitter.
my phone.
Okay. Yeah.
Xiaohongshu, the how Xiaohongshu got into US, I just wondering, because TikTok is in the risk on the verge of being banned.
Yes.
So a lot of people, they have business on TikTok for selling stuff and they're making a lot of money. So they say we're screwed. So then they migrated to Xiaohongshu.
Okay.
They didn't shut down their TikTok because they're still waiting, but they don't want to be in that limbo. So they migrated to Xiaohongshu. They're on both sides. So in case one day they shut down TikTok, they can still be on Xiaohongshu. But there's still a loss for them because let's say you have 500,000 followers in TikTok, which help you generate your revenue. Now you're on Xiaohongshu, you start from zero.
And
Yeah.
the reason it became very popular was because of all the talk of TikTok was actually taken offline for like
Oh, it was
1 or 2 days or
Okay.
whatever. I think it was 1 day. They actually
Right,
shut
right,
it
right.
down.
One
and then
day.
they brought it back.
Yeah.
And offline means that if you were to open it, it wouldn't refresh. It would just be like, sorry, bye bye.
In fact, people were selling. Might have been a couple days. People were selling iPhones with pre-installed TikTok app on it for like hundreds or thousands of dollars or something because people had to have their TikTok. Supposedly, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's a matter of technology.
I think that's why they're aiming the TikTok because it's just more popular. The other one is just not popular.
There are many theories. Some say they target TikTok because after this during the Gaza crisis, because young people tend to support Palestinian side.
And
Young people are users of TikTok.
Yeah, they're all there.
And because the algorithm, so they get a lot of information. It's
Yeah.
not like manipulated by China. It's just that's how it works. The algorithm, they will
increasing
feed
the
you what you
viewership
like.
there, so more people
Yeah.
see it.
So American Congress, which is controlled by Jewish lobby, they say that this cannot continue. So they try to aim at TikTok in the name of national security. That's one theory.
No, I mean, because like I said, the China can influence, they can actually provide a different view through TikTok.
But actually,
So
China
it's,
didn't.
it's,
China,
they're not filtering all the videos and that they just let it come.
I cannot
from
deny.
different ones in there.
I cannot deny China will have one day have this capability, but I can pretty much guarantee you they're not doing it. They haven't done it. Number one, they don't have to do it, right? It's a good business this is money earner. They don't want to ruin it for just some minor benefit in terms of intelligence warfare. So they don't do it. They don't do it, and it's a Singaporean company, subsidiary of a Chinese company. So they don't bother doing it. But another reason they try to take TikTok because Mark Zuckerberg, even Walmart or Microsoft, they kind of envy TikTok's market share. They want to take it. They want to add it to their portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything. It's influence. Is
Maybe they're all
financing,
the
money,
reasons.
profit, all that stuff in there. I mean, plus it's targeting the younger generation. That's what they're going for. They always need the younger generation in there. They don't need all the older people watching it. They need young people.
Right.
So and I think that's what the market share for the young people through TikTok is the most. That's why they just need.
Yeah,
that stuff.
maybe they're all reasons.
Yeah.
They just don't say it. The only reason they say it in public is national security or Chinese manipulation. Nobody can deny if they really want to do it, they should be able to do it. But I argue that they haven't done it. They don't see the need. And also the young people, old people thing. I think we were kind of discussing why Israel versus Palestinian, why certain section of population supports Israel, the other section Palestinian. Oh, we talk about the Harvard, Harvard and Penn, UPenn.
Yeah.
They're because they're in the Israeli side or the congressman in the Israeli pocket side. Oh, they're not enforcing, they're not protecting people against anti-Semitism. My observation is, for the DEI people, for the progressives, for the left-wing people, they tend to support Palestinian side, because in that context, Jews are white. But in the other context, Jews are not white. But in that context, Jews are white. So the progressives, they are always on the victim side, the minority, ethnic minority, gender minority, that sort of thing. So it's natural for them to side with Palestinians because they're the DEI people, they're the virtual sympathy, and they tend to sympathize with the victims. So the Jews are the other side. That's how you see in Congress although they are probably the Jewish lobby's back pocket or something, but you see more Republicans, the right wing, to speak up for the Israel or accuse the other side of anti-Semitism and try to remove the Harvard president. This is more on the Republican side, and Democratic side, they're not as active in that way. Although they may still afraid to speak against Israeli because they still have money influenced by the lobby, but they're not as active or outwardly obvious as the Republican side because they have the religion. They think their sect of Christianity. They think they should side with the Jews.
Judeo-Christian.
Judeo-Christian ideology. Also, they're on the side of, well, Democrat, progressives. They're on the side of DEI, minority rights. So the other side will be the Republican side, the conservatives.
The great irony is that a lot of Palestinian or Americans who support Palestine or are anti-Israel stayed away from the polls in the swing states. So
Yeah.
So that
Well,
it's not that outlandish to say that they got Trump elected, the anti-Israel people.
Yeah, in a sense, there was, I think, between 5 and 8 million less people who voted in '24 than had voted in '20. And Trump's vote went up by about 1 million, but her vote was several million below Joe Biden.
They had parties. They were interviewing people on TV, where like at Muslim community centers in Minnesota or whatever, which is I think is a swing state. But they were like, yeah, we can't support Harris, so we're not going to vote. Obviously, we can't support Trump, so we're not going to vote today, and we're having a get together.
I know that obviously that has the wrong effect. Yeah.
And if it's
for what they wanted.
If it's concentrated in swing states, maybe that's why Trump.
Well, they probably got. There may have been some Congress people who lost. The largest population of Palestinians is in Michigan, which was basically, I think, considered a swing state. Minnesota, I think, wasn't. Minnesota was solid blue, either way.
Yeah, usually it is.
But Michigan used to be, but not anymore. It was a labor state, but that's when they built cars in Detroit. Do less of that.
I have a question on that. If you want to go back to the Gaza problem, all that stuff in there, so does anybody knows how the Hamas got created?
I don't know. They came to power in 2008. They were elected legitimately.
How
over, I guess, the Palestinian Authority. I'm not sure.
It's
Palestinian Authority is still in power.
You know
in the West
that
Bank.
Israel created Hamas.
Well,
because,
I've heard that.
Before that,
I've
there was a different organization called Fatah. If I remember, I think it's called Fatah.
Fatwa?
No, I think it's like Fatah or something like that. I'm not sure in English in there.
I think
So there used to be a different organization. So they created an opposition, Hamas. So they actually fight each other.
Okay.
And then Hamas took over and became their power in the Palestine in there. So they actually and the Europe financed Hamas till the whatever November 7th, or it still was financed from Europe, the Hamas.
So what's their motivation? Why did they do that?
So that's another thing. That's where I'm actually connecting the dots now. So my question is, it's happened November 7th, right? The attack happened. So
October 7th.
it's actually October 7th, right? So now if we go back there and see like, so Israel, I mean, they actually pretty much kind of like own the whole thing. They know exactly what's happening in Gaza. They have spies all over the place in there. So now we have something that was prepared for years. So hundreds of fighters had to actually like, you know, they actually went through under the whatever the fences in there. They had the parachutes in there, so they had to prepare themselves months and months and ahead of time. Then for some reason, by
they
any
train.
chance,
They train
but-
on the
yes, they
on the
train,
glider or
just
something
whatever
like that.
the parachute just to go over it.
Yeah.
But by any chance, they have like a movie, a music festival in there, just right by the border over there. And for some reason, there was like no defense, no army, nobody's protecting it. So nobody cared about this thing. It's just let's go have fun. So I mean, that's like a small question, like starting from there. And then like just especially you remember the pager stuff in there where the pagers exploded all over the place.
in Lebanon.
So Lebanon, I mean everywhere. So they actually control. They know exactly what's happening around them. Lebanon, Gaza, everywhere. Because not only pagers is just a small thing in there. They had the spies all over the place, and now they even say like in Gaza, oh we killed this guy. We knew exactly where he was in this building. Oh we killed this guy. You know you remember like they would keep telling you we killed this guy in this building, that guy in this building. They know exactly. They said this is the tunnel over there, this tunnel over there. They even didn't get there. They were bombing the hospital and saying this is the tunnels there. They know exactly.
Right.
They knew everything in there. So if they control Hamas. And the finance through the Europe and pretty much I'm pretty sure the United States involved. So now we have the Hamas attacking for some reason Israel. So the question why? I'm actually going back to 9/11. 9/11. Terrorists attack the United States. What happened after that? You open whatever. Let's fight terrorists all over the world. Let's destroy this and this and this and that. The same thing happened in Israel. They needed this attack, so they actually opened their arms and say, let's destroy Gaza. Let's destroy Lebanon. Let's take over Syria. Let's just destroy it because now we can do whatever we want.
Yeah,
we got
the problem
attacked.
is there's
We're
no direct
protecting
evidence.
ourselves.
I know. I understand that. I understand that logic. I think it's plausible. The problem is there's no direct evidence.
Art only works by feelings. He has said multiple times in this group that
It's not a feat. It's
he
it's-
doesn't
it's intuition.
There's
to facts. He only operates by feelings.
It's,
I was working
it's
at
intuition and the
I was
logic.
working at the FBI during 9/11. I was a not low level, but I actually I was a clerk. I was not an agent. I was working just not far from here.
There wasn't no FBI.
Huh?
But
I haven't worked for them in over 20 years, so I had top secret security clearance only because I worked the overnight shift. So I had to, because there was only 2 of us in the office, and we would get teletypes in the middle of the night. This was in the months leading up to 9/11, which was after the United States had been attacked in East Africa in 1998. The embassies were attacked, and a couple dozen Americans were killed, as well as Native Africans. The USS Cole bombing in 2000. So the US was under high alert, like where's the next attack going to happen? I was getting teletypes from all around the world. Al-Qaeda and Bin Laden determined to attack the United States. Getting all this
was that a
information.
Bin Laden who actually lived in the United States by that time?
Bin Laden at that
Yeah.
time in 2001 was
Yeah,
not living in the
he
United
actually
States.
left the United States after the 9/11.
Okay.
I mean, research that stuff on there. He was living in here in the United States. Okay, keep going.
Okay, so I was getting all of this information. So are you saying all of these teletypes that I was getting in the middle of the night were all like part of a script?
Oh, go ahead, keep going. I have no idea. I mean, you're telling me.
So, okay, we were getting all this information, chatter from all over the world that Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda are going to attack the United States. We don't know how or when. We have some ideas of how or when, but we're not sure. And there was a million different pieces of information coming from all over the world. It's a global intelligence community. So that's evidence for Al-Qaeda was responsible for 9/11. Now, if you're saying someone else, Israel,